My wife ignored my messages all day. At 11 p.m., she finally came home and smirked. You know what happened? I had a one-night stand with my boss, and I'd do it again. I just nodded and finished my meal in silence. The next morning, when she woke up expecting coffee in bed, she got, "You ever have one of those nights where your gut just knows something's off?" Yeah, that was me, sitting in my dimly lit kitchen at 10:58 p.m., poking at a plate of leftover fried rice like it had personally offended me. The clock above the stove ticked loud enough to double as a soundtrack for bad decisions. 11 hits, and right on cue, I hear the front door open. Her heels started clicking down the hallway like an impatient metronome. Each step timed perfectly to announce, "Brace yourself, I'm about to ruin your week." She walked in like a movie villain who'd already practiced her monologue in the car. Same beige trench coat she always wore when she wanted to look important. The irony? It was the same one she wore the night she promised we'd always be honest with each other. Spoiler alert, she lied. Her eyes didn't even meet mine. They hovered somewhere above my head, like I was furniture, or worse, a subscription she'd been meaning to cancel. She tossed her purse on the counter, sighed dramatically, and I knew something theatrical was coming. Then came the smirk, the kind of half-smile that should come with a warning label. "You know what happened tonight?" she said, her tone sharp, casual, cruel, like she was about to tell me my favorite show got canceled. I didn't answer, mostly because I was chewing, and because I wasn't sure which version of her I was dealing with, the drunk one, the guilt-ridden one, or the one who thought emotional warfare was foreplay. "I had a one-night stand with my boss," she said, like she was reciting the weather. "And I'd do it again. You could have dropped a feather in that kitchen and heard it echo. But me? I didn't do the whole dramatic fork drop thing like you see in movies. I didn't yell, throw plates, or faint into a conveniently placed couch. Nope. I just chewed my rice. Slowly, like a monk meditating through a crisis. Each bite was a mix of soy sauce, betrayal, and the faint taste of my sanity trying to exit my body. Somewhere between bites 3 and 4, I swear I heard my dignity pack a suitcase. The thing is, when you've been married long enough, you learn to spot the exact second your relationship flatlines. Mine died somewhere between one night stand and "I'd do it again." I didn't even flinch. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and nodded once. Not a dramatic nod. A small, polite one. The kind that says, "Copy that. Message received. Enjoy the flames, sweetheart." It's the international sign for, "Oh, you messed up, but I'm too calm to make this fun for you." Apparently, she mistook that nod for weakness. Cute. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and smirked wider, like she'd just won a prize for most honest villain of the year. "You're not going to say anything?" she asked, genuinely disappointed, as if she wanted a performance. Like I was supposed to give her the kind of meltdown that makes for good gossip later. "Sorry, Belinda. Wrong audience. I was done auditioning for roles in your soap opera." I swallowed, took a sip of water, and said, "Congratulations." Just one word. The silence that followed? Oh, it was delicious. You could almost hear her brain short-circuiting. She blinked a few times, like she was trying to process whether I was being serious. I wasn't smiling, but I wasn't angry either. Just calm. Which, trust me, scared her more. Calm men are dangerous. They're the ones who start planning. Her jaw tightened. "You're not going to fight for me?" she said, her voice shaky, confused, maybe even a little scared. Like she'd expected fireworks and got a spreadsheet instead. "Fight for what, Belinda?" I asked, my tone even. "You're moving in with your boss and pregnant with his child, not joining a pottery class." That landed like a punch she didn't see coming. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The silence stretched long enough to make both of us uncomfortable. Then she grabbed her phone, muttered something about needing space, and stomped off toward the bedroom. I didn't follow her, didn't beg, didn't ask questions. Instead, I sat there, watching the condensation trail down my water glass like it had all the answers I needed. My brain was running faster than a caffeine-fueled accountant during tax season. I was angry, sure, but under that anger was something sharper. Focus. I looked at the leftover rice, then at the woman disappearing down the hall, and I swear I felt this strange sense of peace. Like, yeah, this is it. The plot twist my therapist warned me about. And in that moment, as the door to our bedroom slammed, I mentally opened a brand new Excel sheet in my head and titled it, Operation Bye Bye Belinda. Column A, Assets. Column B, passwords. Column C, exit strategy. I even gave it a color-coded format, because if I was going to dismantle a marriage, I wanted it to look organized. I sat back, exhaled, and smiled. A real one this time. Not because I was happy, but because I knew something she didn't. Calm wasn't weakness. It was precision. She thought she'd just detonated a bomb. She didn't realize I was the guy who built the fallout shelter. She came back out a few minutes later, hair tied up, face freshly washed, wearing one of my t-shirts like she was auditioning for sympathy. "You're not saying anything," she muttered, almost defensive. "You don't even care?" I shrugged. "Care's expensive. I'm saving mine for someone who deserves it." Her eyes narrowed. "You're unbelievable." "Funny," I said, standing up and collecting my plate. "That's what your boss probably said too." That one hit. She huffed, stomped past me again, and slammed the bedroom door again. I rinsed my plate, loaded the dishwasher, and actually laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes when you've hit the point of no return and suddenly feel lighter because, honestly, what else is left to lose? I poured myself a drink, turned on the TV, and flipped through channels until I landed on one of those late-night infomercials about self-improvement. Some shiny-teethed guy in a suit was saying, "Your life can change in one decision." I raised my glass to the screen and said, "Cheers to that, buddy." Around midnight, I heard her crying through the door. Not loud sobs, just that quiet, muffled kind that sounds like guilt trying to negotiate with pride. I didn't go in. I'd done that before. Comforted, consoled, believed. Not this time. That chapter was over, and for once, I was going to let the silence do the talking. I went to my desk, opened my laptop, and actually created that Excel sheet for real. Yeah, I'm that guy. Heartbroken, but efficient. I started listing every shared account, every asset, every subscription, Netflix, Spotify, the damn Costco card. If she was walking out, she wasn't walking out with the perks. By the time I was done, I'd mapped out a 12-step plan to reclaim my peace of mind and most of my furniture. It was therapeutic, like journaling, but with more formulas. At one point, I paused, staring at our wedding photo framed on the bookshelf. We looked happy, two idiots grinning at a future that apparently came with fine print. I walked over, picked it up, and set it face down. Not out of anger. Just closure. That version of us didn't exist anymore, and honestly, good riddance. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I missed the days when quiet meant peace, not aftermath. But then, somewhere between the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of that damn wall clock, something in me settled. The ache didn't vanish, but it stopped screaming. That's when I realized, maybe this wasn't the end of my life. Maybe it was the start of my rebranding arc. I sat on the couch. Milo, the dog, my only reliable roommate, jumped up beside me, his head tilting like he was asking, "We good, man?" I scratched behind his ears and said, "Better than ever, buddy. We're downsizing drama." He wagged his tail, which I took as emotional support. The next morning, I'd probably have to face her again. Pretend to coexist while pretending not to see her texts from Mr. Bossman. But tonight, I let myself breathe. I'd survived the confession. The bomb went off, and I was still standing. Barefoot, bruised ego, but standing. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, on the couch, obviously, I muttered to myself, "You did good, man." Because sometimes surviving is enough. I pulled a blanket over myself, stared at the ceiling, and smiled one last time. Not because of her. Because of what she'd just given me. Clarity, motivation, and the rarest gift of all, a clean break disguised as betrayal. And right before sleep took over, I thought about how tomorrow would go. She'd probably wake up pretending nothing happened. Maybe she'd make coffee. Maybe she'd try to act normal. But I knew better. The moment she confessed, she set off a countdown she didn't even know existed. Day 1 of Operation Bye Bye Belinda had officially begun. And damn, it was going to be beautiful. Morning sunlight used to mean something peaceful. Fresh starts, new chances, the smell of coffee, the illusion that life wasn't a complete circus. Not today. The sunlight crawling through my blinds felt judgmental, like even nature was in on the gossip. I woke up on the couch, neck sore, dignity bruised, and the faint echo of last night's. I slept with my boss still buzzing like a mosquito in my skull. You know what's funny? Betrayal doesn't wake you up with a slap. It wakes you up with clarity. And a cramp. I rolled over, groaned, and checked the clock. 7:13 a.m. I had exactly 47 minutes before she emerged from the bedroom, pretending life was normal. So, I did what any emotionally stable, freshly betrayed husband would do. I made coffee strong enough to file for divorce on its own. The sound of the coffee maker sputtering filled the kitchen. That smell, normally my favorite, hit different. This wasn't comfort. This was caffeine for war. I stood there in my boxers and an old t-shirt that said, "World's okayest husband." The irony stung. And then I heard it. Her voice. That familiar, casual tone like she hadn't detonated my evening 12 hours earlier. "Coffee, please," she called out, stretching her syllables like I was her personal barista in this emotional Starbucks we apparently lived in. Usually, I'd bring it to her with foam art, maybe a dumb heart shape on top, because I used to believe in trying. I'd even drop a kiss on her forehead, like an idiot who thought loyalty was a team sport. Not today. Today I stood in the doorway, sipping my own cup, smiling like a man who'd just discovered the Wi-Fi password to freedom. She looked at me from the bed, hair messy, face unbothered, like betrayal was part of her skincare routine. "Coffee?" she asked again, impatient. "Oh," I said, tilting my head. "You mean the one-night stand special? Comes black, bitter, and served cold." The way her eyes blinked, once, twice, confusion blooming like a bad rash, was pure art. She actually had the nerve to look offended. What's that supposed to mean? I took another slow sip, because timing matters in these things. "I think you know, Belinda. Unless amnesia was part of the pillow talk." She frowned, sitting up, clutching the blanket like it could hide her shame. "You're still mad about last night?" I raised an eyebrow. "Still? You confessed to cheating, bragged you'd do it again, and went to bed like you just finished reading a bedtime story. So, yeah, still might be understating it." She huffed, brushing her hair back. "I was drunk. Right?" I said, nodding. "Because tequila makes you honest, not creative." "You didn't invent that story. You just lost the ability to filter it." For a second, she looked guilty. Then, like clockwork, came the deflection. "You've been distant lately. Always working. You made me feel neglected." Ah, there it was. The classic villain monologue. "You made me cheat." I almost clapped. "I'm sorry," I said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "I didn't realize loyalty was something you canceled when the Wi-Fi got slow." She glared, but I didn't stop. "You felt neglected, so your solution was to play Twister with your boss? Genius. What's next? Rob a bank because you felt underpaid?" She rolled her eyes. "You're being childish." "Childish?" I laughed. "No, childish is eating cookies before dinner. I'm being factual." I walked over to the counter, poured her a cup of coffee, black, no sugar, and carried it back, setting it down with a smile so polite it should have been illegal. "Here," I said, "your morning dose of consequences." She stared at the cup like it might bite her. "What's your problem?" "Belinda," I said, leaning on the doorframe. "My problem is I used to think we were a team. Turns out I was playing basketball while you were interviewing for the other side's cheer squad." Her lip trembled for half a second. Then she recovered, grabbed the cup, and took a sip just to prove a point. I swear, the bitterness hit her soul. She set it down fast. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, "I'm being honest. You should try it. I hear it's trending this season." For a long moment, we just stared at each other, the kind of silence that doesn't need words because the air's already screaming. She tried to hold my gaze, but guilt's heavy. Eventually, she looked away. "I made a mistake," she whispered. I tilted my head. "Just one?" "Because that's not how you described it last night." That one landed. Her shoulders tensed, and she started fiddling with the blanket again. "Can we not do this first thing in the morning?" "Oh, sorry," I said, mock apologetic. "I didn't realize betrayal had office hours." She scowled. "You're an ass." "Thank you," I said, sipping again. "Took years of marriage to earn that title." She swung her legs out of bed, clearly done with my entire existence. "I don't have time for this," she muttered, heading toward the bathroom. "Of course not," I said. "You've got to get to work. Wouldn't want to keep your boss waiting." Her hand froze on the door handle. Bingo. She turned around, fire in her eyes. "You're not funny." "Oh, I disagree," I said, grinning. "I'm hilarious. You just lost your sense of humor around the same time you lost your moral compass." She disappeared into the bathroom, slamming the door. The sound echoed through the house, but it didn't shake me. I felt good. Not healed, not happy, but powerful. like a man who'd stopped drowning and realized he could stand up in the water the whole time. I went to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and laughed when I saw her meal-prepped lunches neatly stacked on the top shelf. All those color-coded containers for a woman who couldn't organize her conscience. I pulled one out, labeled Tuesday, tuna salad, and fed it to Milo, who wagged his tail like he'd just inherited wealth. "Enjoy it, buddy," I said. "You're eating guilt-free." The rest of the morning was quiet. Too quiet. She got dressed in silence, doing that thing where she pretends to be mad to cover up being caught. Every move she made screamed, "I'm the victim here." She grabbed her purse, avoided eye contact, and headed for the door. "Hey," I said as she reached for the handle. She paused. "What? You forgot something." She turned, confused. I lifted her empty coffee mug. "Your cup. Thought you might want to take it with you. Symbolic, since it's as empty as your apologies." Her mouth fell open. No words, no defense. Just one sharp exhale through her nose before she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. And just like that, I was alone. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt, it hummed. The air felt lighter. My kitchen wasn't a crime scene anymore. It was the headquarters for Operation Bye Bye Belinda. I cleaned the mug she didn't drink from, wiped the counter, and caught my reflection in the window. I looked tired, sure, but there was something else there too. Focus. The kind that comes when a storm clears, and you can finally see the wreckage you're going to rebuild from. I picked up my phone, opened a note, and started typing. Phase 1, mental detachment, complete. Phase 2, information gathering, in progress. Phase 3, legal execution, pending. Yeah, it was dramatic. But so was she, and I was done being the supporting character in her show. I spent the rest of the morning doing little acts of quiet rebellion. Canceled her streaming subscriptions. Changed the Netflix password from Belinda Baby to Try Again Liar 123. Unlinked her Amazon account. Even changed the smart home voice to male and renamed it Karma. So now, whenever she'd say Alexa, the voice would respond, "I think you mean consequences." It was petty. Beautifully petty. Around 10 a.m., Tarek called. "Hey, man, how's married life?" he asked, clueless. "Defunct," I said. "What?" "Yeah." I sighed, stirring my now-cold coffee. Turns out my wife's extracurriculars include networking. Horizontally. There was a long pause, then Tarek whistled. "Damn, bro. You good?" I chuckled. "Define good." "I'm emotionally homeless, but financially awake." "That's dark," he said. "You want me to come by?" "Nah," I said. "I've got this. I'm starting my new side hustle. Revenge, but make it subtle." He laughed. "Only you would turn betrayal into a project plan." "Of course," I said. "Heartbreaks, just rebranding with more paperwork." After we hung up, I leaned back in my chair, feeling something weirdly close to excitement. My marriage might have imploded, but my sense of humor? Thriving. By noon, she texted, "We need to talk tonight." I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. "Sorry, busy making coffee for someone faithful." Petty? Absolutely. Satisfying. Beyond measure. I set my phone down, poured another cup for myself, and raised it in a toast to the quiet. "Here's to mornings without pretending," I said aloud. Milo barked, like he agreed. And for the first time in months, my coffee didn't taste bitter. It tasted like freedom. If you told me a month ago that my post-breakup coping mechanism would involve Excel, I would have laughed in your face. But there I was, a day after Belinda's morning performance of Coffee, Please, sitting in my home office in pajamas, drinking cold brew out of a whiskey glass, creating what might be the most emotionally satisfying spreadsheet ever conceived. While she was at work, or whatever she was calling her extracurricular activities these days, I began my new favorite hobby, data collection. Forget yoga, meditation, or journaling. Revenge organization therapy? That was my jam. I opened my laptop, cracked my knuckles, and titled a new document, Operation Bye Bye Belinda, Assets, Accounts, and Annihilation. Column A, Accounts. Column B, Passwords. Column C, Transfer Status. Column D, Emotional Damage Level. I wasn't crying, I was auditing. See, Belinda always said I had control issues. What she didn't realize was that control is just responsibility with better branding. So, while she was out building her career, practicing workplace betrayal, I was building my firewall. My first stop, joint bank accounts. I logged in, Change the password from Love Wins 2020 to Karma Wins 2025 and set up notifications for any transaction above $5. I also might have renamed the savings account from Vacation Goals to You Played Yourself. Then came insurance policies, life, car, health, you name it. I dug through drawers like a detective in a Netflix series called CSI, Marriage Fraud. By the time I found her hidden folder labeled Private Docs, I was practically humming. Inside were old receipts, tax forms, and a love note from 2018 that read, "We'll always be each other's person." I stared at it for a second, laughed, and said, "Guess she outsourced that position." Then I fed it to the shredder. Therapy in motion. But the real joy came when I got to the passwords. Oh, the passwords. I had every single one stored in a secure manager, because unlike Belinda, I don't trust easily. I printed the list, highlighted the ones I planned to change, and labeled them like trophies. Netflix, done. Amazon, done. Spotify, access revoked. Enjoy ads, Trader. Email. Oh, this one was fun. I set an auto reply that said, "This inbox no longer accepts messages from cheaters or clowns." I even added a small formula at the top of the sheet. Equals if, Belinda equals honest, miracle, expected outcome. I sat back, sipped my coffee, and smiled. Revenge wasn't loud. Revenge was neat. Around noon, I texted my best friend Tarek. Now, Tarek's the kind of guy who believes that every emotional problem can be solved with either encryption or tacos. He's an IT consultant by day and a chaos enthusiast by night. I sent him a simple message. "Need your help securing my emotional assets." He replied in 10 seconds. "You're finally hacking her?" "No," I wrote. "Just locking down everything before she gets creative." "So, digital divorce prep?" "Exactly. Operation Bye Bye Belinda. I'll bring my laptop and queso." By 3 p.m., Tarek was in my living room, barefoot, eating chips on my couch, while scanning through my laptop like it was a hostage situation. "Man," he said between bites, "you're turning heartbreak into a business plan." "Of course," I said deadpan. "Divorce is just emotional rebranding. I'm pivoting." He laughed so hard, he almost spilled salsa on my keyboard. "You're serious?" "Completely. I'm done crying. I'm spreadsheeting my feelings." He gave me a look that said, "You've lost it, but I respect it." Then he started coding. "I can set up two-step verification for everything. Want me to block her devices from logging in?" "Absolutely," I said. "If she wants Wi-Fi, she can ask her boss for the password." While he typed, I scrolled through her Instagram out of morbid curiosity. New post. A flat lay of coffee, croissant, and a caption that read, "Self-care isn't selfish." I laughed so loud Milo barked. "Self-care? Girl, you're the reason therapists have job security." Tarek leaned over. "Oh, she posted? Let me see." He looked at the photo, squinted, and said, "Bro, that's the same bracelet you bought her for your anniversary." I stared. "Oh my God." She accessorized infidelity. "Want to hack her account?" he asked casually. I grinned. Tempting. But no, we're not playing dirty. We're playing smart. "Right," he said. "Smart revenge." Got it. For the next few hours, we worked like accountants on caffeine and spite. We backed up every financial document, cross-referenced property deeds, even took screenshots of her online purchases, because nothing says betrayal like buying lingerie during a recession. By sunset, I had a color-coded system that could have impressed the IRS. Green meant secured. Yellow meant pending. Red meant lawyer time. I sat back, exhausted but proud. "It's beautiful," I said, staring at the screen like Michelangelo admiring the Sistine Chapel. Tarek nodded. "You've officially weaponized Excel." "Heartbreak requires structure," I said. He laughed. "Man, you're going to turn this into a TED Talk." Title: How to Monetize Betrayal. A Journey in Conditional Formatting. We clinked our coffee mugs and a toast. That night, after Tarek left, I sat alone with my masterpiece of a spreadsheet glowing softly on the screen. Each cell represented control, closure, and a little bit of vengeance. I even added a note at the bottom that read, "She thought I'd crumble. Joke's on her. I calculate." I printed a copy for safekeeping, slipped it into a folder, and placed it in the drawer next to our marriage certificate, which now felt like a warranty that had expired early. Then, just for fun, I opened the bank app again. Her latest transaction popped up, $87.50, Wine Loft Bar and Lounge. I smiled. "Oh, you're still at it." I didn't feel jealous. Not even mad. Just strategic. Because if she thought she was the only one capable of surprises, she clearly never met me mid-motivation. I started researching divorce attorneys. Landed on a name that sounded like she charged by the ounce of confidence. Mrs. Delgado. SQ her website tagline read, "Don't get even. Get everything." I bookmarked it, poured another drink, and leaned back in my chair, feeling something close to peace. Revenge wasn't chaos. It was math, and I was damn good at math. By midnight, I had my plan neatly stored in both physical and digital form. Password protected, cloud-backed, and printed on premium paper, because if I was going to burn down a marriage, I wanted it to look professional. I sat there in the glow of the laptop screen, Milo curled up by my feet, and realized something that actually made me laugh out loud. She thought she'd broken me, but what she'd really done was wake me up. I looked at my reflection in the dark window and said to myself, "Congratulations, Belinda. You just turned a man into an organized hurricane." Then I shut down the laptop, patted Milo on the head, and whispered, "Revenge may be slow, buddy, but it auto-saves." When people imagine hiring a divorce lawyer, they picture dramatic phone calls, boxes of tissues, maybe a playlist titled Heartbreak and Chardonnay. Me? I walked into Mrs. Delgado's law office like I was clocking in for a board meeting. I didn't want pity. I wanted precision. I didn't need therapy. I needed a woman who saw marriage not as sacred, but as a contract that could be dissolved faster than bleach on a red wine stain. Mrs. Delgado didn't disappoint. Her office smelled like victory and lavender sanitizer. Diplomas lined the wall, each one basically screaming, "I've ruined happier couples than yours." She was in her 50s, silver hair cut sharp enough to slice egos, wearing a suit that looked like it came with its own legal precedent. The second she shook my hand, I knew Belinda was in trouble. Her grip was firm, her nails immaculate, and her eyes carried the kind of confidence you only get from winning arguments against men twice your size and IQ. "So, Mr. Carver," she said, settling behind her desk, "tell me everything. And don't leave out the juicy parts. I bill by the hour, but I enjoy good storytelling." I smiled. "You'll get a bestseller." My wife confessed she had a one-night stand with her boss. "Recently?" she asked, pen poised like a dagger. "Last week, right before bedtime. Great timing, really. Nothing like ruining sleep and trust in one sentence." Mrs. Delgado nodded sympathetically but smirked, just slightly. "And you have proof?" "Oh," I said, leaning forward with the confidence of a man who'd already built a case stronger than Starbucks coffee. "Mrs. Delgado, I have more documentation than the IRS." Her eyebrows lifted. "Show me." I opened my laptop, clicked the folder labeled Exhibit Belinda, and turned the screen toward her. She scrolled through bank statements, texts, and photos with the enthusiasm of a woman watching her favorite courtroom drama. "Oh, she's done," she said finally. "This is like watching a cat bring a bird home and pretending it's a gift." "I want it handled cleanly," I said. "No yelling, no chaos. Just paperwork and poetic justice." Her lips curved into a satisfied smile. "I like your style, Mr. Carver. Calm vengeance is my favorite flavor." For the next hour, we quietly rearranged my life like we were redecorating after a flood. House title? Under my name only, legally transferred through a quiet amendment she drafted before I'd even finished explaining. Joint accounts? Locked. Cards? Flagged for suspicious activity. Mrs. Delgado typed so fast it sounded like vengeance had a soundtrack. "Your wife's about to learn," she said, "that silence isn't forgiveness, it's strategy." I nodded. "I just want to protect what's mine. And maybe give karma a little nudge." "Consider it done," she said. "You'll sign papers today, I'll file by morning, and by the time she realizes what's happening, she'll be swiping a declined card at Target." Music to my ears. By the time I left her office, I felt 10 pounds lighter, and not just emotionally. It's amazing how freeing it feels to turn heartbreak into logistics. I drove home, windows down, wind in my face, blasting, "We Are the Champions," because irony is a coping mechanism. When I got home, I made myself a sandwich, sat at the kitchen table, and just admired my work. The silence in the house didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt earned. Then my phone buzzed. "Belinda, hey, why's my card not working?" I stared at the screen, chewed my sandwich slowly, and smiled. Then I typed back, "Maybe it's seeing other people." Read at 6:17 p.m. No reply. I laughed out loud. Even Milo looked impressed. Don't look at me like that, buddy, I told him. You'd do the same if you had thumbs. A few minutes later, she called. I didn't pick up. I wanted her to marinate. 10 minutes after that, another text. Belinda, I'm trying to buy groceries. What's going on? Me? Maybe karma's cutting carbs. I tossed my phone aside and poured myself a drink. God, it felt good. Not cruel, just balanced. The universe had been tipping in her favor for too long, and I was just redistributing resources. Around 8, Tarek called. You sound happy, he said suspiciously. I met Delgado, I said. The lawyer? Yeah. She's like if Judge Judy and Wonder Woman had a love child. He laughed. That good. She reorganized my financial life in an hour. I feel spiritually audited. He whistled. So what's next? Now, I said, leaning back. Now I wait. Delgado's filing the paperwork, locking down the rest of the accounts, and I'm sitting here watching justice slow cook. He chuckled. Damn, you really went full spreadsheet on this. Of course, I said. If she can multitask between lies, I can multitask between revenge and meal prep. He laughed harder. You're sick, man. I prefer methodical. We hung up after a few jokes about Belinda's inevitable meltdown. I poured another drink and flipped on the TV, but I couldn't focus. My phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail notification. Curiosity 1. I hit play. Her voice, small and tight. Oliver, please call me. My card got declined at the pharmacy. I needed to pick up something important. I smirked. Hope it was humility. I didn't call back. I didn't even feel bad. This was the woman who'd looked me in the eye and confessed her affair like she was reading a grocery list. She'd earned this little inconvenience. The next morning, I met with Mrs. Delgado again to sign final documents. She had a file thicker than a Bible, neatly tabbed and labeled. All you need to do, she said, sliding it across, is sign here, here, and here. And congratulations, Mr. Carver. You're about to become independently unbothered. I signed each page with the satisfaction of a man autographing his own comeback story. When I was done, she said, now one last thing. Do you want to freeze her access to the joint car lease? I grinned. Absolutely. Let's see how her boss likes playing chauffeur. She chuckled, tapping a few keys. Done. Anything else? I thought about it, then asked, can we flag her credit for a review? Mrs. Delgado's grin widened. We can absolutely do that. God, I love this woman. As I was leaving, she said, you're handling this remarkably well. Organization is cheaper than therapy, I said. That earned me a laugh. Driving home, I passed Belinda's office. Big glass building, full of people pretending to love spreadsheets and pretending not to gossip. For a second, I thought about walking in, giving her boss a polite nod, and saying, thanks for the free motivation. But I had bigger plans. This wasn't about confrontation anymore. This was chess, not checkers. I stopped at a coffee shop instead, got my usual black, and sat by the window. I started sketching out my next move. If Mrs. Delgado was the attorney of destruction, I needed her counterpart, the accountant of ascension. Someone to help me rebuild smarter, richer, and legally bulletproof. Enter Marcus Chun, CPA and part-time miracle worker. Tarek referred me, said the guy, makes the IRS blush. I called him that afternoon. Marcus Chun. He answered, voice smooth, calm, like a financial therapist. Hi, I said. I'm looking for help untangling some, joint finances. Divorce? You're good. He chuckled. I'm better than good. I'm efficient. Send me everything. I emailed him the spreadsheet from Operation Bye Bye Belinda. He called back in 10 minutes. Sir, he said, awed. This is immaculate. You categorized emotional damage levels. I shrugged, though he couldn't see it. Helps with perspective. He laughed. I'll handle the financial transfers. You handle not texting your ex. Deal, I said. 2 professionals, one in law, one in numbers, were now handling my cleanup. And me? I just had to sit back and sip coffee like a man watching karma hit its milestones. By evening, Delgado emailed. Filed and confirmed. Expect updates within 72 hours. 3 days. In 3 days, my life would be officially Belinda-free. That night, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I realized I hadn't checked her social media all day. That was progress. I didn't need to see her filtered, healing journey. I was living mine, unfiltered and tax-deductible. At 9:42 p.m., another text came through. Belinda, I don't know what's happening, but this is cruel. I looked at the message for a long second, then typed. It's not cruelty, Belinda. It's closure, spelled correctly, for once. Send. I turned off my phone, leaned back in my chair, and let the quiet settle. Mrs. Delgado was right. Silence isn't forgiveness. It's strategy. And damn, was mine working beautifully. A week later, Belinda claimed she had a late meeting. Cute. That phrase had become the national anthem of cheating spouses everywhere. Late meeting translates to, I'm about to betray you in high definition. She said it with her usual fake casual tone, wearing that tight black dress that used to be reserved for anniversaries, not accounting discussions. She spritzed perfume like she was prepping for battle, then leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. I caught a whiff of betrayal disguised as Chanel. Don't wait up, she said. I won't, I replied, smiling just enough to make her wonder if I knew something. Because I did. See, I'm not the jealous type. I'm the data collection type. When your wife cheats with her boss, emotions are pointless. Excel sheets and strategy. That's where the power is. So when she left, I finished my sandwich, poured another cup of coffee, and activated Phase 4 of Operation Bye Bye Belinda, the stakeout. I wasn't doing it out of obsession. I was doing it for closure and maybe evidence. Because when you're dealing with someone who lies professionally, screenshots are the only language they understand. Now, a man in my position doesn't just follow his cheating wife in his own car. No, that's amateur hour. I rented a gray sedan from Hertz, the kind of car that screams divorced accountant with nothing left to lose. I even wore a baseball cap and hoodie. I looked like the human version of background noise. As I sat in that rental, parked a block from her office, I realized how absurd it all was. Me, a grown man, watching my wife's workplace like I was in some off-brand spy movie. But then, at exactly 6:42 p.m., the office door opened. And there she was, my soon-to-be ex, walking out with her boss, the man himself, Mr. Forehead Shine 3000. Let me describe this dude. Picture a middle-aged man with a hairline retreating faster than his morals, wearing a suit that cost too much to cover so little integrity. His laugh was loud, fake, and probably flammable. They were talking too close. You know the kind of close that makes you want to Lysol your soul? Yeah, that. They crossed the street, his hand accidentally brushing her back like she was a malfunctioning printer he was trying to reset. I clenched my jaw, not out of rage, but out of second-hand embarrassment. Watching them flirt was like watching two raccoons fight over a shiny trash can. They got into his car, a silver Lexus that screamed midlife crisis, and drove off. I followed at a respectable distance because, again, I'm not reckless. I'm strategic. They headed downtown, right into the heart of temptation, the Ember Lounge, a bar so pretentious it served artisanal ice. I parked 2 blocks away, walked in like I belonged there, and found a spot in the corner booth. I ordered a drink I didn't even want. Something with an umbrella and too much sugar, because blending in requires sacrifice. And there they were, sitting at the bar like 2 rom-com extras who hadn't read the part where everything goes wrong. She laughed loudly, the kind of laugh she hadn't used around me in months. That hurt for about 3 seconds before I realized something. She was performing, overcompensating. Guilt has a laugh track, and hers was on full volume. I took out my phone, opened the camera app, and started recording. Photos, videos, timestamps, each one labeled in my notes like Netflix episodes. Episode 1, Corporate Affairs. Episode 2, The Bonus She Didn't Earn. Episode 3, HR's Worst Nightmare. I zoomed in just as he leaned closer, his hand brushing her thigh. I swear I could hear the distant sound of karma warming up its engines. At one point, she whispered something into his ear, and he laughed so hard he almost spilled his drink. I didn't know what she said, but it was probably something poetic like, "My husband still thinks meetings end after 5. My drink arrived. I raised the glass in a mock toast to myself. "Here's to loyalty," I muttered, taking a sip. It tasted like lies and lime. I watched them for an hour. 1 hour of hand-holding, whispering, and touching that made me want to Clorox my memory. Around 9:15, they finally stood up. She adjusted her dress, he adjusted his ego, and they headed out. I paid the bill, left a generous tip, because I'm petty, not cheap, and followed them at a safe distance. They didn't go back to the office. They didn't even pretend to. Instead, they went straight to the parking garage next door, where I caught them kissing under a flickering light. It looked less like romance and more like an HR complaint waiting to happen. I recorded everything. Every kiss, every touch, every bad decision illuminated by that one stubborn fluorescent bulb. And as I filmed, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt documentation. When they finally drove off in separate cars, I sat in the rental, staring at my phone screen. It was all there, proof that could silence any courtroom dramatics. I exhaled, leaned back, and said to myself, "You just turned pain into evidence. Congratulations, you're officially your own private investigator." Back home, I called Tarek. He picked up on the second ring, already chewing something. "You alive?" "Oh, I'm better than alive," I said. "I'm productive." He laughed. "That sounds dangerous." "What did you do?" "I have footage," I said. "Video, timestamps, everything. It's like Discovery Channel for idiots in love." "No way. You followed her." "Of course," I said. "I'm not stalking. I'm collecting data. For research." He whistled. "Man, I should have brought popcorn. Want me to edit it?" I grinned. "You read my mind. Add subtitles and maybe some dramatic music. Something classy, like Another One Bites the Dust." "Got you," he said. "You want transitions or straight cuts?" "Transitions," I said. "This betrayal deserves smooth fades." He cackled. "You're insane." "I love it." While Tarek worked his editing magic, I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of whiskey. Not out of sadness, out of celebration. It's not every day you catch betrayal in 4K. The next morning, I woke up to a notification. Video file, corporate affairs, final cut.mp4. Tarek had delivered. I hit play. The opening sequence was cinematic, soft jazz, black and white filter, and a title card that said, "Based on poor decisions and cheaper wine." Then came the footage, Belinda and her boss, laughing, touching, the kiss. Tarek even added dramatic slow motion at the perfect moments. It was art. Petty art. Halfway through, I was laughing so hard I had to pause it. Milo looked at me, confused, like, "You okay, man?" "Oh, I'm fantastic," I told him. Netflix could never. By noon, I'd saved the video in 3 different folders, 2 drives, and 1 encrypted cloud. You don't collect gold and leave it unguarded. That afternoon, I went to see Mrs. Delgado again. She took one look at my smug face and said, "You found something." "Better than something," I said, handing her a flash drive. "I found cinema." She plugged it in, pressed play, and within 30 seconds, she was laughing. Actual laughter, the kind that echoes with disbelief and joy. "Oh, this is beautiful," she said. "Do I hear jazz? Classy, right?" "Very. The judge will love it." I grinned. "So what's next?" "Now," she said, "we add this to the file. Judges love evidence with timestamps. It screams competence." As she spoke, I realized something. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't angry. I was free. Watching her fall apart from a distance wasn't cruelty. It was closure in high definition. When I got home that evening, my phone buzzed again. "Belinda, can we talk tonight?" I stared at it, smirked, and replied, "Sorry, got a late meeting." No response. Just silence, the sweet kind. I sat back on the couch, raised my drink, and toasted to the calm. Because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting. I was orchestrating. Belinda thought she was the star of the show, but the truth was, she'd just been demoted to background noise. And I was finally the director. You ever see one of those crime documentaries where the detective lays out all the evidence on a big table and just stands there, staring at it like the universe is whispering secrets through a thumb drive? Yeah, that was me. Except I wasn't solving a murder. I was documenting a slow-motion emotional homicide committed by my wife, Belinda. That night, after I got home from Mrs. Delgado's office, I decided it was time for my own little crime scene exhibit. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, grabbed a stack of printed screenshots, receipts, and a highlighter, and got to work. The dining table that once held romantic dinners and anniversary candles now looked like the season finale of CSI, Marriage Edition. The first folder was labeled Bank Activity, the financial affair. Oh, it was juicy. Late-night Uber rides to conference venues, Venmo payments to a user named J, Martin Wineglass winking face, and a $300 Sephora purchase 2 days before her team-building retreat. Subtlety clearly wasn't her department. The next folder? Text messages. Hundreds of them. each one a little nugget of heartbreak and stupidity. Belinda, you make spreadsheets sexy. Him, I bet you're amazing at data entry, winking faced. I actually laughed out loud. Data entry? That's your flirting game? God, you two deserve each other. Even Milo, who was sitting by my chair, tilted his head like he couldn't believe humans were this dumb. I took a deep breath and kept going. Email confirmations for hotel stays, restaurant bills, and one particularly damning invoice from the Ember Lounge, the same place where I'd filmed her corporate comedy hour with her boss. The timestamps lined up perfectly with my footage. Oh, it was beautiful. Even Mrs. Delgado would have cried tears of legal joy. I printed everything, every message, every transaction, every emoji that now made me want to throw my phone in the ocean. Then I laid them all out on the table, piece by piece. The room was dead quiet except for the sound of paper sliding against wood. When I finally stepped back, I almost clapped. It was a masterpiece. My own personal evidence buffet. There were photos on the left, screenshots in the center, bank statements on the right, and at the top, my piece de resistance. The printed transcript of her voicemail confession from that fateful night. I had a one-night stand with my boss, and I'd do it again. Chef's kiss. I took a sip of whiskey, leaned on the counter, and admired my work like an artist at a gallery opening. Ladies and gentlemen, I said to Milo, tonight's exhibit is titled, How to Ruin a Marriage in 10 Easy Payments. Milo yawned. Typical critic. Then I opened my laptop and started organizing everything into a presentation folder. You know, something sleek. Because if I was going to dismantle her reputation in court, I wanted to do it with style. Mrs. Delgado always said, never underestimate the power of presentation. I created tabs, timeline of deception, financial misconduct, moral bankruptcy, and my personal favorite, texts that aged like milk. By midnight, I had a binder so thick it could double as a doorstop. I labeled it in big, bold letters, Exhibit Belinda, Season Finale. Every page told a story. Every screenshot whispered, you really thought you could get away with this? And the best part? I didn't need to say a word. The evidence screamed louder than I ever could. Even Milo seemed to feel the gravity of it all. He sniffed the binder once, sighed deeply, and gave me a look that said, she really risked steak night for this guy? I know, buddy, I said, patting his head. Some people just aren't built for loyalty or good taste. I sat back, watching the soft glow of the desk lamp cast long shadows across the papers. It almost looked poetic. Revenge, but make it art. I thought about confronting her, about laying it all out, about the dramatic showdown people love to see in movies. But the more I pictured it, the less satisfying it seemed. Yelling wouldn't change the facts. Anger wouldn't give me closure. She'd just twist the story, play the victim, maybe even cry those crocodile tears she'd mastered years ago. No, I wanted quiet destruction. The kind where she woke up one morning and realized the Wi-Fi, the car, the credit cards, the comfort, all of it, had vanished. And the only person she could blame was staring back at her in the mirror. So I planned the reveal. Not with shouting, not with fireworks. Just silence and paperwork. I made a checklist. 1. Deliver all evidence to Mrs. Delgado. 2. Lock personal accounts. 3. Transfer car ownership. 4. Remove her from insurance. 5. Leave envelope on her side of the bed. Each step brought me closer to closure. I wasn't just dismantling a marriage. I was reclaiming my peace, piece by piece. At one point, I paused to refill my drink and glanced at a framed photo of us from our honeymoon in Hawaii. We were smiling, bright, naive, so sure of forever. I picked it up, stared at it for a moment, then placed it face down on the table. That version of us didn't exist anymore. Around 1 a.m., I called Tarek because, let's be honest, revenge hits different when you have an audience. He answered half asleep. Bro, it's 1 a.m. Did you catch her again? Better, I said. I built a case. He yawned. You mean like emotionally or legally? Both, I said proudly. I have photos, receipts, text logs. My dining room looks like the FBI's work-from-home setup. That woke him up. You serious? Dead serious. I've even got categories. My favorite one's called When Adultery Meets Accounting. He started laughing. Man, you're not just moving on. You're writing a damn dissertation. Exactly, I said. This isn't heartbreak, it's research. Send me pics, he said between laughs. I want to see this crime scene of yours. I snapped a photo of the table, the neat rows of evidence glowing under the warm light, and sent it. A minute later, he texted back, "Bro, this belongs in a museum." "I know," I replied. "But the Museum of Karma doesn't open till Monday." We laughed until my stomach hurt. When I finally hung up, I felt lighter. Maybe that was the whiskey talking, or maybe it was the power of finally being done. I stood there for a while, staring at the binder, the papers, the proof. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about clarity, about seeing the truth without the fog of love and denial. For months, I'd been living in her version of reality, a place where lies were misunderstandings and guilt was stress. But not anymore. Now I had facts. Facts that didn't need permission to exist. Before heading to bed, I tucked the binder neatly into a briefcase and placed it by the door, ready for my morning meeting with Mrs. Delgado. The house was dark and still. The only sound was Milo's gentle snoring. I took one last look at the table, now empty again, and whispered, "That's it. Story collected. Exhibit complete." I turned off the light, heading upstairs. On the way, I passed the closed bedroom door. She was in there, sleeping peacefully, unaware that her world was about to implode. Part of me wanted to feel pity, but mostly, I felt satisfaction. When I climbed into bed on the couch, my new preferred sleeping spot, I smiled. Tomorrow, she'd wake up to the sound of consequences knocking, and I'd be sitting there, coffee in hand, ready to watch the show. Morning arrived like a knockoff apology, bright, loud, and way too soon. I'd barely slept. Half because my couch has the personality of a cinder block, and half because I couldn't stop imagining the look on Belinda's face when she realized Karma was a morning person. I got up early, showered, shaved, and brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to dissolve regret. It was D-Day, Deliverance Day. Everything was in place. The binder labeled Exhibit Belinda, season finale, the sealed envelope sitting prettily on the kitchen counter, and my breakfast plan. If revenge had a smell, it'd be maple syrup and poetic justice. I plated pancakes, 3 of them, perfectly circular, golden, heart-shaped because symbolism is important. I even drizzled a little extra syrup in the shape of a question mark. Presentation matters when you're serving karma. At 7:42 a.m., I heard the bedroom door creak open. She emerged wearing one of my t-shirts again, acting like domestic bliss hadn't filed for bankruptcy. Her hair was messy, her eyes half closed. She mumbled, stretching. "Something smells good." "Oh yeah," I said, flipping a pancake. "Something does." She smiled, the same soft, manipulative smile that once could have convinced me the world was fine. "Coffee. On the table," I said. "And something else too." She patted toward the table, still half asleep, humming. She saw the plate of pancakes and the envelope beside it, and for a brief, glorious second, she probably thought I was being sweet. That maybe, after everything, she'd won. That maybe I'd forgiven her. The universe was about to clarify. She sat, tore open the envelope, and started reading. Inside was a single note, typed neatly, professionally, with all the warmth of an HR memo. "Congratulations. You've been promoted to single. P.S. The car's repossessed, rent's due, and your boss can't expense heartbreak. Love always." Oh, she blinked once, twice. Then she read it again. Her mouth fell open like a trapdoor. "What the hell is this?" she said, voice climbing octaves like a panicked violin. I poured coffee into my mug, calm as a Sunday sermon. "It's your performance review," I said. "You scored high in creativity, low in ethics." Her eyes darted around, like the answers might be hiding in the cupboards. "You did something," she hissed. "Technically," I said, "Mrs. Delgado did most of the heavy lifting. I just signed the paperwork." "You're crazy," she snapped, clutching the note like it might bite her. "No," I said, smiling. "I'm organized." Her breathing quickened. "What does this mean? What do you mean car's repossessed?" "Oh," I said casually, flipping another pancake. "The lease was under my name. You'll have to Uber to your next late meeting." Her jaw clenched. "You can't do that." "Already did," I said, taking a bite of pancake. "Turns out I'm remarkably efficient when I'm betrayed before breakfast." She stood up so fast the chair screeched across the tile. "This is insane, Oliver." "Is it?" I asked, setting down my fork. "Because when you confessed your affair, you sounded pretty confident about your decision-making skills." "I'm just matching your energy." She threw the note on the table. "You're punishing me." I shrugged. "Actions, consequences. It's not punishment, it's balance. Her eyes glistened, but I wasn't buying it. I'd seen real tears from her before. This was performance art. I made a mistake, she whispered. Which part? I asked. The cheating or the confession? Her lips trembled. You don't understand. It just happened. Yeah, I said, sipping coffee. So does food poisoning. That one landed. She blinked, speechless. I could practically see the gears turning, trying to find a way to twist this into a redemption arc. But the network had canceled her show. You're not even mad? She said finally, sounding confused, like she missed the script where I was supposed to beg or break down. Mad? I laughed. No, that implies I still care enough to raise my voice. I'm done. Finished. Out of emotional budget. She stared at me, shaking her head. You're a monster. Funny, I said, coming from the woman who made out with her boss in a parking garage. Her nostrils flared. You followed me? Sure did, I said. You were hard to miss, considering the fluorescent lighting and your boss's hairline acting as a spotlight. She gasped. You recorded us? I shrugged. Think of it as home security footage, just not for this home. Her hands balled into fists. You can't use that. Legally. I can, and I will. Morally? You forfeited that conversation at the Ember Lounge. She sat back down, clutching her head. I can't believe this. I know, I said. Self-awareness has never been your strong suit. The room went quiet except for the sound of Milo padding in, tail wagging like he could sense the drama. He sniffed the air, then sat beside me. Good boy, I said, scratching his ear. You want a pancake? Belinda glared. You're feeding the dog pancakes while we're having a serious conversation? Technically, I'm having breakfast, I said. You're having consequences. Her face went red. I'll fight this. I'll get a lawyer. Oh, please do, I said cheerfully. Mrs. Delgado loves a challenge. She's already color-coded your downfall. She stormed toward the counter, grabbed her phone, and started furiously typing, probably texting Mr. Hairline and Heartache for sympathy. I walked over, leaned against the doorway, and said, By the way, your phone bill's due tomorrow. That's on you now, too. She froze. You cut me off? Completely, I said. Financial independence builds character. She spun around, eyes wild. I have nowhere to go. Sure you do, I said. You've got a boss who seems very accommodating. The silence that followed was delicious. You could have buttered it and served it with brunch. She threw her phone onto the couch and screamed, You humiliated me. I smiled. Not yet. I've been very discreet. But keep yelling. I'll upload the video to a private drive called Career Limiting Moves. Her shoulders slumped. For the first time in weeks, she looked small, human, maybe even scared. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting a little. I loved her once. Deeply. But the woman standing in front of me wasn't the one I married. She'd traded vows for validation and integrity for instant gratification. So no, I didn't feel guilty for letting her sit in the mess she made. I took my plate to the sink, rinsed it, and said quietly, You should start packing. She blinked. You're kicking me out. Consider it an early checkout, I said. No refund. Oliver. Belinda, I interrupted. I wish you luck. Truly. But you don't get to burn down the house and act surprised when the smoke alarm goes off. She stood there, shaking. You'll regret this. I turned, leaning against the counter. I already regretted marrying you. This part's just damage control. Her lip quivered. You're cold. I'm healed, I said simply. For a long, quiet moment, she just stared at me, maybe waiting for me to crack. But I didn't. I couldn't. I'd already grieved the marriage. This was the epilogue. Finally, she grabbed her bag, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out. The door slammed hard enough to rattle a frame on the wall. The house fell silent again. I exhaled, long and steady. The tension that had lived in my shoulders for months finally loosened. Milo trotted over and rested his head on my leg, tail thumping softly. It's just us now, buddy, I said, scratching his ears. And look at that. We finally have peace and pancakes. I sat back down, poured another cup of coffee, and stared at the empty seat across from me. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Like quiet was no longer the absence of noise, but the presence of sanity. The phone buzzed. A text from Tarek. Did she get the note? I smiled and typed back. She got the deluxe package. Screaming, denial, exit slam. 10 out of 10 performance. He replied with a laughing emoji and damn, man, you're free. Free. The word looked good on the screen. I leaned back, watching the morning light spill across the kitchen, the same kitchen that had heard every fight, every fake apology, every lie. Today it felt new, lighter, like the house itself was relieved she was gone. I grabbed my phone again and opened my playlist. Song number 1, Don't Stop Me Now. Fitting. I turned up the volume until Milo's ears perked. Dancing in pajama pants at 8 a.m. wasn't on my bucket list, but freedom does strange things to a man. I sang along, off-key, flipping pancakes with one hand and air guitaring with the spatula in the other. Halfway through the song, I caught my reflection in the microwave door, messy hair, wrinkled t-shirt, ridiculous grin, and thought, yeah, this guy's gonna be okay. Before heading out to meet Mrs. Delgado to file the final set of documents, I cleaned the kitchen, fed Milo, and tucked the envelope back into my drawer. A keepsake, not of her, but of the moment I took my life back. As I grabbed my keys, I noticed her mug still sitting on the counter, lipstick print and all. I considered throwing it out, then decided against it. No, let it stay. A reminder of what blind trust costs. I walked to the door, sunlight spilling across the floor. I took a deep breath, smiled, and whispered to myself, "Welcome to your new morning routine." Then I stepped outside, coffee in one hand, freedom in the other. If you've never been to divorce court, let me paint you a picture. It's like The Office meets Judge Judy. The same awkward silences, the same forced smiles, and absolutely no snacks. Everyone's pretending to be civilized while secretly calculating how many ways they can ruin each other before lunch. Walking in that morning, I felt oddly calm. Maybe it was the coffee. Maybe it was the relief that this circus was finally reaching its last act. Belinda, meanwhile, looked like she'd spent the night wrestling her conscience and lost. She was sitting 2 rows ahead, pretending to scroll through her phone like she wasn't fighting the urge to hurl it at me. Her lawyer sat beside her, some guy named Derek with slick back hair and an ego so shiny it could have been used as a mirror. Mrs. Delgado, my legal gladiator, gave me a nod. "Ready?" she whispered. "Born ready," I said. "Let's turn heartbreak into case law." The bailiff called the session to order. The judge entered. A silver-haired woman with glasses perched halfway down her nose and a face that said she'd seen it all. If this woman's life were a movie, it'd be called 50 Shades of Divorce. Case number 4823, Carver versus Carver, the clerk announced. The judge glanced over her glasses at both of us. "Let's make this quick." I skipped breakfast. Mrs. Delgado smiled faintly. "Your Honor, we'll be as efficient as possible." Belinda's lawyer cleared his throat, instantly trying to charm. "Your Honor, my client is simply seeking a fair division of marital assets. She contributed greatly to the household and—" The judge raised a hand. "Save the speech. I'll see the paperwork." Mrs. Delgado slid our neatly labeled folder across the bench. I swear the sound it made, paper gliding over wood, was the sweetest music I'd ever heard. "Your Honor," she said, "this is Exhibit Belinda, season finale. Includes proof of infidelity, financial mismanagement, and enough text messages to crash a phone." The judge adjusted her glasses and flipped open the binder. Belinda shifted in her seat. Her lawyer tried to keep his poker face, but I could tell by the twitch in his jaw he hadn't been briefed on all the evidence. Page 1. Screenshots of texts between Belinda and her boss. Page 2. Hotel receipts. Page 3. The video. Yes, the one Tarek edited with jazz music and tasteful fade-outs. When the video started playing on the courtroom monitor, you could have heard a pin drop. There they were, Belinda and Mr. Hairline, in glorious 1080p. Mrs. Delgado had even added subtitles for clarity. "Belinda, you make spreadsheets sexy. Boss, only for you, baby." The courtroom collectively exhaled a scandalized oof. Even the judge's eyebrows lifted, and I swear one juror in the back whispered, "Yikes." Belinda's lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, this is highly inappropriate." The judge waved him off. "Oh, hush. It's evidence." And oddly cinematic. Mrs. Delgado smiled sweetly. "My IT consultant added the transitions, Your Honor." "Very professional," the judge said dryly. "Continue." The footage ended with Belinda's boss wiping lipstick off his chin. When the screen went dark, the silence was thicker than courtroom coffee. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Carver, is this you texting you make spreadsheets sexy?" Belinda froze. Her lawyer opened his mouth, but she beat him to it. I can explain. No need, the judge said, closing the folder. I've been married 3 times. I know that look. A few snickers rippled through the courtroom. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was doing cartwheels. Mrs. Delgado stood. Your Honor, in light of this overwhelming evidence, we request that my client retain full ownership of the marital property and all financial accounts. Mrs. Carver's actions demonstrate clear breach of marital trust and misuse of shared funds. Belinda's lawyer scrambled. Your Honor, we contend that Mr. Carver's behavior since the incident, specifically his vindictive tone, has caused undue emotional distress to my client. The judge looked at him like he'd just asked her to babysit on a Friday night. Emotional distress? She said. Sir, your client was doing the electric slide with her boss in a hotel bar. I'd call that cardio, not distress. Even the bailiff chuckled. Mrs. Delgado smirked. We rest our case. Belinda shot me a glare sharp enough to slice marble. I just smiled politely, like a man watching karma finish dessert. The judge shuffled through some papers, made a few notes, then looked at both of us. Here's what's going to happen. Mr. Carver retains ownership of the house, vehicle, and all joint accounts. Mrs. Carver forfeits claim due to breach of fiduciary and marital trust. Belinda gasped. That's not fair. The judge shrugged. Neither was your extracurricular activity. Next case. Bang. Gavel down. It was the sound of freedom. I exhaled, the kind of deep exhale that feels like you're letting go of a ghost. Mrs. Delgado turned to me, her grin subtle but victorious. Congratulations, Mr. Carver, she whispered. You're officially a free man. And for what it's worth, you handled that beautifully. Thanks, I said. I owe you coffee. And maybe a commemorative trophy. She laughed. Buy me a latte, and we'll call it even. Belinda stormed out of the courtroom before I could say anything, heels clacking against the tile like punctuation marks of defeat. I waited until she disappeared around the corner before letting out a long, satisfied sigh. Outside, the air felt fresher, lighter. Divorce shouldn't feel like a victory, but damn, it tasted like one. I called Tarek. Bro, he said. Tell me the judge loved the video. She did, I said. She called it cinematic. Tarek hooped so loud people turned to stare. I'm adding that to my resume. Editor of legally admissible heartbreak content. Put it under special skills, I said. So you're free now? Free and well documented. Man, you gotta celebrate. Drinks tonight. Absolutely, I said. I'm buying. With my own card this time. We met later at a rooftop bar, the kind of place with overpriced cocktails and string lights designed to make regret look romantic. Tarek raised his glass. To new beginnings. I clinked mine against his. And better endings. We laughed. For the first time in months, it wasn't bitter. It was pure, stupid joy. Halfway through the night, my phone buzzed. A message from Belinda. You ruined me. I stared at it for a second, then typed back. No, you did that yourself. I just submitted the paperwork. Send. I turned my phone face down and kept drinking. Tarek leaned over. Was that her? Yup. What did she say? Nothing new. Just confirming she's still allergic to accountability. He snorted beer through his nose. You're savage. I'm honest, I said. There's a difference. Later that night, I walked home alone, city lights bouncing off the pavement, the kind of quiet hum that only exists when something heavy finally lifts off your shoulders. I passed a bakery that used to be our Saturday morning spot. The smell hit me, warm bread, sugar, nostalgia, but this time, it didn't hurt. It just was. I stopped outside, watched a couple laughing inside, and smiled. Not the bitter kind, the real kind. Because despite everything, I'd survived it. Back home, I changed into sweats, grabbed Milo's leash, and took him for a late-night walk. He sniffed every bush like it owed him money, tail wagging like life was simple. Maybe he was onto something. Buddy, I said, we did it. Court's over. Freedom reinstated. He barked once, approvingly. When we got back, I poured myself one last drink, sat on the couch, and turned on some background jazz, the same kind Tarek had used in the video. Fitting soundtrack for the credits. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment the judge said the words, Mr. Carver retains ownership. That phrase was going to live rent-free in my head forever, unlike Belinda. I raised my glass in a mock toast to the empty room. Here's to honesty, loyalty, and knowing when to lawyer up. Milo jumped on the couch beside me, resting his head on my leg. I ruffled his fur. We're gonna be fine, kid. Turns out justice has good taste. Before turning in for the night, I texted Mrs. Delgado one last time. Thank you for everything. You made the process painless. She replied within minutes. It's never painless, Mr. Carver. But it's always worth it. I smiled, shut off my phone, and sat there in the quiet. For once, it wasn't the lonely kind of quiet. It was peaceful. Divorce court wasn't supposed to be funny, but that day, it had been a comedy. The kind where the villain trips over her own script, the audience applauds, and the protagonist walks off into the sunset, holding a stack of legally binding happiness. When I finally crawled into bed, I didn't dream about her. I dreamed about pancakes, passports, and possibilities. Because tomorrow wasn't a continuation of the past. It was the pilot episode of something entirely new. A month after the courtroom grand finale, peace had finally become my favorite background noise. No drama, no emotional invoices, just me, Milo, and the occasional Netflix binge that didn't involve marital infidelity. Life was smooth, until Belinda's sister, Lydia, sent me an invite that read, family gathering. Be civil, it's her birthday. I should have ignored it. But curiosity and pettiness are cousins, and I happen to be close with both. So there I was, walking into Lydia's overly decorated suburban living room. Balloons everywhere, fake laughter bouncing off the walls, and the guest of dishonor standing in the middle, clutching a wine glass like she'd earned it. Belinda froze when she saw me. The air went tight enough to file taxes on. Oliver, she said, forcing a smile. Didn't think you'd show. Oh, I wouldn't miss this, I said. I brought a gift too. Her mom tried to play peacemaker. Let's all be adults tonight. Absolutely, I said. Adults love transparency. People started whispering. Lydia's husband whispered, this'll be good. I pretended not to hear. Belinda, meanwhile, was doing that nervous laugh thing. Like if she laughed hard enough, she could make reality leave the room. What gift could you possibly have for me? She asked. I held up my phone, connected it to the Bluetooth speaker, and smiled. Audio memories. The first few seconds were harmless. Ambient noise, clinking glasses. Then her voice came on, clear as crystal. You taste better than my husband's cooking. Boom. Instant silence. Someone dropped a fork. Her mom gasped like she'd just witnessed a ghost. Her boss's wife, yes, the boss's wife, was standing right there, frozen mid-sip. You could feel the shock ripple through the room like an electrical surge. Turn that off. Belinda screamed, lunging toward me, but I stepped back, calm as a yoga instructor. Oh, come on, I said. You said it publicly. I'm just helping you own it. Her boss's wife threw her wine in her husband's face. The guy choked, sputtered, and yelled. It wasn't what it sounded like, which made everyone laugh because, well, it sounded exactly like what it was. Belinda's mother fainted into the cake. Lydia yelled, not on the buttercream, because priorities. The whole place erupted in chaos, screaming, crying, arguing. And I just stood there, sipping my soda like it was a fine vintage. I leaned toward the nearest waiter and said, add that to my bill, please. Entertainment fee. Then I turned, smiled at the mess I didn't have to clean up anymore, and walked out. Outside, the night air felt good, light, free, earned. I slid into my car, rolled down the window, and whispered, Happy birthday, Belinda. Some gifts just keep giving. It's funny how quiet can sound different after a storm. For months, silence used to feel heavy, like waiting for a fight to start. Now, it's peace with good acoustics. The only thing breaking it most mornings is Milo's tail thumping against the floor, demanding breakfast like rents due. My new routine's simple. Wake up, stretch, make coffee, and not think about Belinda. The coffee part's easy, the last one's a little trickier. Every now and then, I'll pass her old mug in the cabinet, the one that says, Boss Lady. I don't throw it away. It reminds me to never ignore red flags just because they're printed on ceramic. People keep asking, do you regret it? The marriage? The whole messy ending? I tell them the truth, sure. I regret the years I spent giving CPR to something that was already dead. But the ending? Nah. Best plot twist of my life. I still talk to Mrs. Delgado sometimes. She calls occasionally just to check if I'm emotionally solvent. Her words, not mine. Tarek, on the other hand, won't shut up about turning my story into a podcast. Heartbreak and Hard Drives, his working title. I told him to wait until the restraining order's hypothetical. Works better, too. Turns out, when you remove daily chaos from your life, productivity skyrockets. Who knew? I've even started jogging again. Not for fitness, just to prove to myself I can run away from something without emotional baggage this time. Belinda? Last I heard, she's finding herself. Translation: jobless, carless, and probably allergic to accountability. Her boss got demoted after the birthday fiasco went viral. Thank you, Internet. Actions have consequences, and apparently, Yelp reviews. The best part of my mornings now is the small stuff. My pancakes don't burn. My Wi-Fi connects instantly. My peace of mind has a password only I know. Sometimes I'll look at Milo and say, "Buddy, you're the only one I'd share my passwords with." And he just blinks like, "Damn right." There's something liberating about rebuilding your life without needing permission. I used to think revenge was the reward, but it isn't. Pieces. Revenge just makes the story entertaining. Peace gives it a happy ending. Every weekend, I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and a sense of humor sharp enough to cut through nostalgia. Sometimes I even laugh, remembering her line, "I'd do it again." And yeah, I believe her. But I'd do it again too, the part where I walked away. Because now, the only thing I wake up next to is my own damn sanity. And it doesn't lie, cheat, or need Wi-Fi to feel loved. Don't show up and spoil my mother's birthday, my wife warned. I simply smiled and walked away. That night, the headlines broke. My company had been sold for millions. Everyone at her mom's party saw the news. So there I was, standing in my own kitchen like some kind of idiot Boy Scout, clutching a bottle of Chateau Margaux 2015 that cost me $300 and probably a small piece of my dignity. The bottle had this fancy label with gold lettering that practically screamed, "I'm trying too hard to impress my in-laws." But hey, desperate times call for expensive wines, right? My mother-in-law, Patricia, or Patty the passive-aggressive as I affectionately called her in my head, was turning 60 in 3 days, and apparently this particular vintage was her absolute favorite, which she'd mentioned approximately 4,000 times during last Thanksgiving's dinner while giving me pointed looks about how some people appreciate the finer things in life. I walked into the kitchen feeling pretty good about myself, honestly. The wine guy at the boutique store had assured me this was top-shelf stuff, the kind of bottle that says, "I care about you," without actually having to say it out loud, which is basically the love language of my wife's entire family. My wife, Clara, was doing her usual counterlean thing, one hip cocked against the granite countertop we'd renovated last year, scrolling through her phone with the intensity of a day trader watching the market crash. Except Clara wasn't checking stocks or bonds, or whatever rich people worry about. No, she was deep diving into her social media feeds, probably stalking her college sorority sisters, or reading through group chats where middle-aged women compared their children's accomplishments like they were trading Pokemon cards. The kitchen smelled like the vanilla candle she always insisted on burning, even though I'd told her a million times that vanilla-scented anything makes our house smell like a Bath and Body Works threw up in a Starbucks. But did she listen? Of course not. That would require acknowledging that I had opinions, which was apparently not part of our marriage contract. I cleared my throat, setting the wine bottle down on the counter with what I thought was an appropriate amount of casual confidence. "Got your mom's favorite," I said, trying to sound like the thoughtful son-in-law I was desperately attempting to be. The guy at the store said this is a particularly good year. Something about the weather in Bordeaux and the grape harvest and a bunch of other stuff I pretended to understand while nodding seriously. Clara didn't even glance up from her phone. Her thumb kept scrolling, like she was trying to reach the bottom of the internet itself. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only about 15 seconds, watching her perfectly manicured nail tap against the screen. She'd just gotten them done yesterday, some complicated gel situation that cost more than my first car payment and came in a color she called dusty rose, but looked suspiciously like regular pink to my untrained eye. Finally, without even doing me the courtesy of making eye contact, she said, "Oh, by the way, don't show up to Mom's birthday party." I blinked. Once, twice, 3 times, like some kind of malfunctioning robot trying to process information that didn't compute. Surely I'd misheard her. Surely my wife of 5 years hadn't just uninvited me to a family event while simultaneously ignoring my $300 piece offering that was currently sitting on the counter between us like a very expensive, very awkward third wheel. Come again, I said, because apparently my brain had short-circuited and those were the only two words it could produce. She let out this sigh, this dramatic, theatrical sigh that she'd clearly learned from watching too many reality TV shows, the kind of sigh that communicated both exhaustion and superiority in one impressive breath. It's complicated, she said, still not looking at me, still scrolling through that stupid phone like it contained the secrets of the universe instead of just pictures of her friend Jennifer's vacation in the Maldives and some memes about wine o'clock. I waited. She didn't elaborate. Of course, she didn't elaborate. That would be too straightforward, too honest, too much like actual communication between two people who supposedly loved each other. Complicated how? I pressed, because I'm a glutton for punishment and apparently enjoyed torturing myself. Clara finally, looked up from her phone, and I immediately wished she hadn't. She had on what I privately called her PR smile, that perfectly practiced expression she used when she was about to say something absolutely horrible, but wanted to package it in pretty wrapping paper with a bow on top. It was the same smile she used when telling her mother that her new haircut looked interesting, or when informing the waitress that her salad had too much dressing, but she was totally fine with it. No worries. There'll be investors there, she said slowly, like she was explaining quantum physics to a golden retriever. High society friends of Mom's. Important business contacts. Kenneth is bringing his new girlfriend, and apparently she's some kind of social media influencer with like 500,000 followers or something ridiculous. You know, people who matter in certain circles. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, somewhere between disbelief and that specific brand of anger that comes from being completely unsurprised by someone's cruelty. So, I don't matter? I said, keeping my voice level, which took more effort than I care to admit. She did this little head tilt thing, like she was considering the question with genuine thoughtfulness, which somehow made it worse. You just don't fit the crowd, she said carefully, choosing her words like she was defusing a bomb. It's not personal, babe. It's just that Mom wants to maintain a certain image, and with all these potential investors and business partners coming, she thinks it would be better if we kept things focused on the right connections. You understand, right? It's about optics. Oh, good, I said, nodding slowly. For a second there, I thought it was personal. But you're right. It's just about me being fundamentally inadequate for your family's social standards. Much better. Really takes the sting out of it. She didn't laugh. She didn't even crack a smile. Instead, she looked at me with this mixture of pity and annoyance, like I was a child having a tantrum about not getting dessert before dinner. Don't be dramatic, she said, turning back to her phone. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I stood there for another moment, looking at the expensive wine bottle, looking at my wife, looking at the life I'd somehow built where I could be uninvited to family events in my own kitchen on a random Tuesday afternoon like it was no big deal. The vanilla candle flickered on the counter, filling the air with its cloying sweetness, and I suddenly felt very tired. But instead of yelling, instead of arguing, instead of pointing out the 17 different ways this conversation was absolutely insane, I just smiled. A real smile this time, not one of Clara's PR specials, but a genuine smile that came from some deep well of absurdity inside me. No worries, I said cheerfully, way too cheerfully for someone who'd just been told they weren't good enough for their own in-laws. Wouldn't want to spoil the ambience with my middle-class aura. Might accidentally use the wrong fork or say something embarrassing like, nice to meet you, instead of delighted to make your acquaintance. The horror. I picked up the wine bottle, my $300 gesture of goodwill that had lasted all of 30 seconds before becoming completely pointless, and set it back down with a gentle thunk. Give this to your mom with my regards, I said. Tell her I hope she has a wonderful party with all the right people who matter in all the right ways. Then I walked out of the kitchen, leaving Clara to her scrolling and her social climbing and her complicated explanations that somehow always ended with me being not quite enough. Behind me, I heard her call out something that might have been my name or might have been wait, but I didn't stop to find out. I'd learned a long time ago that sometimes the best response to disrespect isn't anger or arguments. Sometimes it's just walking away and letting people sit with their own garbage. 3 days until Patricia's Big 6-0. 3 days until a party I wasn't invited to. 3 days until everything changed in ways that none of them could possibly see coming. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's the thing about being underestimated. It's simultaneously the most annoying and the most useful position you can occupy in life. Clara and her entire family, from Patricia down to her cousin Gerald, who still lived in his parents' basement at 37, saw me as aggressively average. I was the quiet husband who worked on computers, which is basically code for, we have no idea what he does, but it involves screens and probably isn't important. I wore sneakers to family dinners instead of those overpriced leather loafers that Kenneth liked to show off, the ones that cost $600 and looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd never actually walked anywhere. I drove a Toyota instead of a BMW. I said, "You too," when waiters told me to enjoy my meal. In their eyes, I was basically one step above a mall kiosk employee, and honestly, they treated me with about the same level of respect. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know because they'd never bothered to ask a single meaningful question about my work, was that I owned DataStride Analytics, a company I'd co-founded 8 years ago with my best friend and certified genius, Alex Navarro. Alex was this brilliant, slightly manic software engineer who survived almost entirely on cold brew coffee and spite. The man once coded for 36 hours straight during a critical product launch and legitimately forgot it was his birthday until his mom called him crying because he hadn't answered her texts. He showed up to our first investor meeting wearing a hoodie that said, "I void warranties," and somehow still managed to charm the room with his technical wizardry. That's the kind of partner you want when you're building something from scratch, someone who cares more about the code than the optics. We'd started DataStride in my one-bedroom apartment back when I was dating Clara, before the wedding, before her family decided I was an acceptable but disappointing addition to their gene pool. The apartment was tiny, one of those places where you could cook dinner, watch TV, and answer the door without moving more than 5 feet in any direction. Our entire server infrastructure lived on a coffee table we'd bought from IKEA for $40, assembled incorrectly, and then fixed with duct tape and prayers. We had exactly 3 clients in those first 6 months, and I'm pretty sure 2 of them only hired us because they felt bad after seeing our office setup. Alex slept on my couch more nights than I could count, usually passing out mid-sentence while explaining some complex algorithm that I pretended to fully understand. But we had a vision, and more importantly, we had a solution to a real problem. Mid-sized businesses were drowning in data. Customer information, sales figures, inventory tracking, employee records, and they had no efficient way to process it all. Most of them were still using Excel spreadsheets that crashed every other day and database systems that looked like they'd been designed during the Clinton administration. We built a software platform that could automate all of that, integrate everything into one clean dashboard, and actually make sense of the chaos. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't some flashy app that would get written up in TechCrunch with a headline about disrupting the industry. It was just incredibly, beautifully useful, and that turned out to be enough. We bootstrapped everything, which is a fancy way of saying we were broker than broke and funded the company with credit cards, freelance gigs, and an alarming amount of ramen noodles. Alex picked up side projects building websites for local businesses. I did contract work designing database systems for whoever would hire me. We poured every dollar back into DataStride, improving the software, fixing bugs, adding features that our clients actually asked for instead of ones we thought looked cool. It was unglamorous and exhausting, and there were about 17 different moments when we almost gave up entirely, but we didn't. Mostly because we were too stubborn and stupid to know when to quit. Slowly, painfully, the company grew. 3 clients became 10. 10 became 50. We hired our first employee, a woman named Sarah who was somehow even more obsessed with data optimization than Alex, which I didn't think was possible. We moved out of my apartment and into an actual office space, one of those trendy co-working situations with exposed brick and motivational posters about synergy. Clara came to visit exactly once, looked around at the hodgepodge of mismatched desks and whiteboards covered in incomprehensible diagrams, and said, "It's very startup Y," in a tone that suggested she was talking about a communicable disease. I tried explaining the business to her family exactly one time, at a Christmas dinner during our 2nd year of operation. Patricia had asked what I did for a living, not because she cared, but because her friend Diane was there, and Patricia needed to fill awkward silence with something other than the sound of Kenneth chewing with his mouth open. I launched into this explanation about data processing and automation software and how we were helping businesses streamline their operations, and I watched every single eye at that table glaze over like I was reciting the phone book in Mandarin. Patricia interrupted me halfway through with, "So you fix computers?" Kenneth snorted into his wine glass. Clara's dad, Richard, just nodded and said, "That's nice, son," before immediately changing the subject to golf, which apparently was a more intellectually stimulating topic than the company I'd built from nothing. After that, I stopped trying. Why bother explaining cloud architecture and API integrations to people who thought Wi-Fi was magic and couldn't figure out how to update their iPhone apps? It was easier to just smile and nod when they made their little jokes about me being the IT guy or asked if I could fix their printer. Yeah, sure, I'll get right on that. Right after I finish managing our 300 corporate clients and coordinating with our development team across 3 continents. But you go ahead and think I'm just really good with Microsoft Word. The irony was delicious, though. While Clara's family was busy networking with their country club friends and humble bragging about Kenneth's middle management position at his father-in-law's real estate company, Alex and I were actually building something real. We weren't just talking about business and success and making connections. We were doing it, line by line, client by client, problem by problem. We worked nights and weekends. We dealt with server crashes at 3 in the morning and angry clients who thought their issues were emergencies. We learned about payroll and taxes and legal compliance and all the boring, unglamorous stuff that nobody warns you about when you're dreaming of being an entrepreneur. And it worked. Against all odds and despite my complete lack of fancy shoes, it actually worked. By year 5, we had clients in 12 states. By year 6, we'd expanded internationally, opening a small office in Toronto and another in London. By year 7, we had over 300 active clients and a team of 45 employees who were way smarter than me and Alex combined. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were thriving, and nobody in my wife's family had a single clue. I kept it quiet, deliberately and completely. I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't name-drop Data Stride at family dinners. I didn't correct people when they assumed I was some kind of low-level tech support guy who fixed email problems for a living. Part of it was privacy. I genuinely didn't need or want their validation. But part of it, the darker and more honest part, was curiosity. I wanted to see how they'd treat me without knowing. Wanted to understand who these people really were when they thought I was beneath them. And boy, did they show me. Clara knew I had a company, but she'd never bothered to learn the details. Never asked about revenue or growth or any of the milestones that kept me up at night with equal parts terror and excitement. To her, Data Stride was my little tech thing, a hobby business that probably made enough money to be respectable, but not enough to be impressive. She had no idea about our client list, no clue about our expansion plans, no concept of the deals we were negotiating or the industry recognition we'd earned. And honestly, I never told her because she never asked. That's marriage, baby, 2 people living parallel lives and calling it partnership. So yeah, I was a nobody in their eyes. The forgettable son-in-law with the computer job and the boring shoes and the unfortunate habit of not being rich or important or connected enough to matter at birthday parties. What they didn't know was about to become everyone's problem. The same week that Clara uninvited me from her mother's birthday party like I was some kind of embarrassing +1 she'd regretted bringing to prom, Alex and I were in the middle of finalizing the biggest deal of our lives. And when I say biggest, I don't mean pretty good or nice bonus big. I mean the kind of big that makes you question if you're living in actual reality or if you've somehow slipped into an alternate universe where things actually work out for regular people who started their companies on IKEA furniture. Tech Venture Global, or TVG as the cool kids called it. And yes, there were apparently cool kids in corporate acquisitions, wanted to buy Data Stride Analytics. Not just invest in it, not just partner with it, but straight up acquire the whole thing for an amount of money that still made my brain short-circuit every time I thought about it too hard. $320 million. That's $320 million for those of you keeping track at home, which is the kind of number that only exists in movies about tech bros or drug cartels. And yet here we were, living in that reality. We'd been negotiating this deal for 6 months, which in business time feels like approximately 40 years. It started back in March when Margaret Reeves, the CEO of Tech Venture Global, reached out through her acquisition team after reading about us in some industry publication that I didn't even know existed. Apparently, DataStride had made enough noise in the business software world that the big players were paying attention, which was news to me since I was still mentally categorizing us as that scrappy startup that might fall apart at any moment. The negotiation process was absolutely insane. We had lawyers, multiple lawyers, expensive lawyers, lawyers who billed by the quarter hour and probably charged you for thinking about your case while they were in the shower. We had financial audits, where people went through every single transaction we'd ever made since day one, including that time Alex expensed a pizza at 2 a.m. and labeled it critical infrastructure support. We had due diligence calls at unholy hours because half our acquisition team was based in Singapore and apparently didn't believe in reasonable time zones. We had video conferences where people used words like synergy and vertical integration and strategic alignment without a trace of irony, just saying them straight-faced like they meant something real instead of being corporate mad libs. Alex handled it way better than I did, probably because his brain was already wired for chaos and he treated the whole thing like an extremely complicated puzzle that needed solving. I, on the other hand, spent most of those 6 months in a state of low-grade panic, convinced that at any moment someone would realize we were just two guys who'd started this whole thing on a broken coffee table and the deal would evaporate like a fever dream. But it didn't evaporate. It kept moving forward, step by step, contract by contract, revision by revision, until suddenly it was Friday and we were actually going to sign the papers. The signing happened at Tech Venture Global's downtown offices, which occupied the top 3 floors of one of those glass skyscrapers that looked like they were designed by someone who'd never experienced weather. Everything was aggressively modern and expensive looking, the kind of place where even the staplers probably cost more than my first car. The conference room where we gathered had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a table made of some exotic wood that definitely came from a tree that had a name and a biography, and chairs that were somehow both uncomfortable and pretentious at the same time. The room smelled like fresh espresso and expensive paper, which I guess is what $300 million smells like. There were maybe 15 people there, lawyers, executives, the CFO whose name I could never remember, but who always wore bow ties like he was auditioning for a barbershop quartet, and various other important business people who did important business things. Everyone had leather portfolios and fancy pens, and this air of casual confidence that comes from making deals like this every other Tuesday. Margaret Reeves sat at the head of the table, looking exactly like a CEO should look, impeccably dressed, perfectly composed, radiating the kind of authority that comes from decades of telling people what to do and having them actually do it. She was in her late 50s, sharp as hell, and had this reputation in the industry for being both brilliant and terrifying in equal measure. I'd heard stories about her negotiations that made Game of Thrones look like a children's book about sharing. But when she shook my hand after we signed the final document, her smile was genuine. "Congratulations," she said, and her grip was firm without being aggressive, which I appreciated because I was already nervous enough without getting into a dominance handshake situation. "You've built something truly remarkable here. DataStride isn't just good software. It's elegant software, which is rare. You should be very proud." "Thank you," I said, trying to sound like someone who regularly sold companies for 9 figures instead of someone who was internally screaming. "It's mostly held together by coffee and trauma, but yeah, I'm proud. We both are." I nodded toward Alex, who was grinning like he'd just won the lottery, which I guess technically we both had. Margaret laughed, an actual human laugh that made her seem less like a corporate robot and more like a person who understood that building a company was 50% strategy and 50% barely controlled chaos. "The best companies usually are," she said. "Coffee and trauma are underrated ingredients for success." She handed me a folder, fancy cardstock, embossed logo, the whole 9 yards, and said, "The press release goes live at 6 p.m. tonight. Every major business publication will have it within minutes. You might want to prepare for some attention. Maybe take the weekend to celebrate. You've earned it." "Oh, I will," I said, grinning wider than I probably should have been in a professional setting. "Just not at my in-laws' place." "Long story." She raised an eyebrow but didn't push, which was probably for the best because I didn't need to explain my family drama to a woman who'd just handed me generational wealth. Instead, she moved on to Alex, congratulating him on his technical genius and promising that the engineering team would be in good hands under the new structure. Alex nodded enthusiastically, already talking about product roadmaps and feature development like we hadn't just fundamentally changed our entire lives 5 minutes ago. After the signing, we did the corporate photo thing. Everyone standing around the conference table, holding up the signed documents like we just caught a really expensive fish. Someone from their PR team took about 100 pictures from different angles, probably so they could pick the one where everyone looked successful and nobody was blinking weird. I shook hands with what felt like every person in the building, including the receptionist who seemed genuinely excited for us, which was nice. Alex and I finally escaped to the parking garage around 5:30, both of us carrying copies of the signed agreements in those fancy folders that felt too important to just throw in a backpack. We stood next to my Toyota, my very ordinary, very paid-off Toyota that was now owned by someone who could buy 100 Toyotas without checking his bank account, and just looked at each other. "We did it," Alex said quietly, like he was afraid saying it too loud would somehow undo everything. "We did it," I agreed. "We actually did it, man. We sold our company for $320 million. That's a real thing that just happened. Your in-laws are going to lose their minds," he said, and started laughing. "Dude, Clara told you not to come to the party tonight because you weren't important enough. This is the best timing in the history of timing." I checked my watch. 5:35. The press release would go live in 25 minutes. Patricia's party was already underway, probably hitting that sweet spot where everyone had enough champagne to be chatty, but not enough to be sloppy. Clara was probably making small talk with investors, talking up Kenneth's girlfriend's Instagram following, doing all the social climbing that apparently mattered so much more than her own husband. "You know what?" I said. "I'm going home. I'm ordering Chinese food. I'm putting on sweatpants. And I'm going to watch this whole thing blow up from the comfort of my couch like the nobody I am." Alex grinned. "That's the most beautiful revenge I've ever heard." "It's not revenge," I said, unlocking my car. "It's just really, really good timing." At exactly 5:30 p.m., while Clara's entire family was gathered at Patricia's mansion, and I do mean mansion, the kind of place that has a name like Windermere Estate, and comes with its own driveway that takes 45 seconds to drive down, I was sprawled across my couch in sweatpants that had a hole in the left knee and a stain of mysterious origin near the pocket. The sweatpants were at least 7 years old, older than some of my friendships, and they'd reached that perfect level of worn-in comfort where they basically felt like wearing a cloud. My t-shirt said, "I paused my game to be here," in faded letters, which felt appropriate given that I'd literally been uninvited from a family event for not being impressive enough. I had Chinese takeout spread across my coffee table like I was conducting some kind of delicious archaeological dig. Kung Pao chicken, pork fried rice, egg rolls that were still hot enough to burn the roof of my mouth if I wasn't careful, and those little wontons in hot oil that probably took years off my life, but tasted like heaven wrapped in dough. I was eating straight from the containers with chopsticks, occasionally dropping rice on my shirt, and not even caring, because that's what washing machines were for. This was freedom. This was bliss. This was what Friday night looked like when you weren't busy pretending to be someone you weren't for the benefit of people who'd already decided you weren't good enough. Patricia's party, meanwhile, was probably in full swing. I could picture it perfectly because I'd been to enough of these events to know the formula by heart. The mansion would be decorated with those elegant flower arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent, the kind that looked like they'd been assembled by someone with a degree in botanical architecture. There would be a catering company, not just any catering company, but one of those boutique operations that Patricia loved to brag about discovering, even though literally everyone in their social circle used the same one. The servers would be wearing matching uniforms and carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres with names I couldn't pronounce. Tiny pieces of food on tiny plates that somehow cost $50 per person and left you hungry enough to hit a drive-thru on the way home. The guest list would be Patricia's greatest hits collection of important people. There'd be Richard's business partners from the investment firm, all wearing expensive suits and talking about market trends like they were discussing sports scores. There'd be Patricia's country club friends, women who lunched professionally and could discuss the merits of different spa treatments with the seriousness of UN peace negotiations. Kenneth would be there with his new girlfriend, the Instagram influencer whose 500,000 followers apparently made her more valuable than someone who'd been married into the family for 5 years. Clara's Aunt Susan would be holding court in the corner, telling the same stories about her trip to the Amalfi Coast that she'd told at every family gathering since 2019. And everyone, absolutely everyone, would be dressed in cocktail attire that required dry cleaning and uncomfortable shoes. I took a bite of Kung Pao chicken and sighed contentedly. This was so much better. At exactly 6 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Alex. It was just 2 words and 7 exclamation marks. It's out. I grabbed the TV remote, which had been buried under a napkin, and flipped to the local business news channel. And there it was, breaking news banner scrolling across the bottom of the screen like it was announcing the end of the world or the start of a zombie apocalypse. Local entrepreneur sells data stride analytics for $320 million. My face popped up on screen. It was a photo from our company website. One of those professional headshots where they make you smile until your face hurts, and then take about 300 pictures until they find one where you don't look like a hostage. Next to my photo was a shot of our office building, looking way more impressive on TV than it did in real life. My name scrolled across the bottom in that official news font. Daniel Morrison, co-founder and CEO. I almost choked on a piece of chicken. Like, actually choked. Had to cough and reach for my water bottle while staring at the TV screen in disbelief. It was one thing to know intellectually that this was happening. It was another thing entirely to see your face on the news with a dollar amount that looked like a phone number next to it. The anchor, a woman named Stephanie Chun who I'd seen on TV 1,000 times but never imagined would be talking about me, was reading from her teleprompter with that practiced enthusiasm that news anchors must learn in anchor school. In a major acquisition deal announced this evening, local tech company Datastride Analytics has been purchased by Tech Venture Global for $320 million. The company, founded 8 years ago by Daniel Morrison and Alex Navarro, provides data processing and automation software to businesses across North America and Europe. They cut to footage of our office, showing employees working at their desks, which was weird because I didn't remember anyone filming that. Then they showed the Tech Venture Global logo, some stock footage of people in business meetings looking very serious about business, and then back to my headshot. Morrison, who kept a relatively low profile in the local business community, built Datastride from a bootstrap startup to a major player in the business software industry. Stephanie continued. The acquisition marks one of the largest tech deals in the region this year. I sat there on my couch, in my ancient sweatpants, holding chopsticks in one hand and the remote in the other, watching myself become news. It was surreal. It was absurd. It was absolutely perfect timing considering where my wife currently was and who she was currently with. My phone started buzzing. Not just one notification, but multiple, overlapping, the kind of digital assault that usually means something has gone very right or very wrong. LinkedIn was exploding. I had 17 new connection requests in the span of 2 minutes. My email inbox was filling up faster than I could watch it. Journalists wanted interviews. Industry publications wanted comments. Random people from my past were suddenly remembering that we'd been close, even though I hadn't spoken to them since high school graduation. I opened my messages and nearly spit out my fried rice. There was a text from Kenneth, Clara's brother, the same Kenneth who'd once referred to me as a budget husband at a family barbecue where he thought I was out of earshot. Bro. The message read, and I could already feel my eye twitching at the word bro, coming from someone who'd never called me that in his entire life. Proud of you, man. Really proud. We should grab lunch sometime. Connect properly, you know? Network a bit. I've got some ideas I'd love to run by you. I laughed out loud, an actual snort laugh that echoed in my empty living room. Kenneth wanted to network with me now. Kenneth, who couldn't be bothered to say more than 3 words to me at family dinners, who always managed to position himself physically away from me in group photos, who'd once asked Clara, right in front of me, if she was sure about this whole marriage thing. That Kenneth wanted to grab lunch and talk about ideas. Yeah, sure thing, Kenny, I muttered to my phone. Right after I schedule that meeting with NASA and coffee with the Pope. I'll have my people call your people. We'll do lunch. It'll be great. More texts came in. Clara's cousin Michelle, who'd always treated me like I was invisible at family gatherings, suddenly wanted to congratulate me and catch up sometime. Patricia's friend Diane, who'd once asked me if I'd ever considered getting a real job, Sent a LinkedIn connection request with a note about exciting collaboration opportunities. Even people from my college days who'd never responded to a single message I'd sent over the years were suddenly coming out of the woodwork like I was having some kind of reunion party and everyone was invited. My phone rang. Real deal phone call, not just a text. The caller ID showed a local number I didn't recognize. I answered, mostly because I was curious and also because the Kung Pao chicken could wait 30 seconds. Hello, is this Daniel Morrison? A professional-sounding woman asked. Speaking, I said, trying to swallow my food quickly and probably failing. Mr. Morrison, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. We're putting together a spotlight segment on local business success stories, and we'd love to have you on tonight's Late Show if you're available. We could send a car for you in about an hour. I looked down at my sweatpants, my stained t-shirt, the Chinese food containers scattered across my coffee table like casualties of war. My hair was doing that thing where it stuck up in the back because I'd been lying on the couch. I had soy sauce on my thumb. Can you make it in 2 hours instead? I asked. I need to shower and find pants that don't have holes in them. Jennifer laughed. 2 hours works perfectly. We'll send a car to your address at 8. This is going to be a great segment, Mr. Morrison. Congratulations on your success. Thanks, I said. And please, call me Daniel. Mr. Morrison makes me sound like someone who knows what he's doing. After I hung up, I sat there for another minute, just processing. In the span of 30 minutes, I'd gone from eating Chinese food in sweatpants to being invited on the evening news. My phone was still buzzing with notifications. The TV was still showing clips about the acquisition, cycling through the same information with different camera angles. And somewhere across town, at a party I'd been explicitly told not to attend, my wife and her family were probably having a very different kind of evening than they'd planned. I picked up another egg roll and bit into it, savoring the crispy exterior and the slightly greasy interior that health experts would definitely not approve of. Well, I said to my empty living room, to my ancient sweatpants, to the TV screen still showing my face, guess I should find a turtleneck or something. Gotta look the part of a tech entrepreneur, right? The universe, as usual, didn't respond. But my phone buzzed again, and I could practically feel the shockwaves traveling across the city toward Patricia's mansion, toward the party full of important people, toward the moment when someone inevitably checked their phone and saw the news. This was going to be good. At 6:12 p.m., exactly 12 minutes after the press release went live and approximately 3 minutes after I'd committed to appearing on live television while still having soy sauce on my fingers, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID made me smile, so wide I probably looked like the Joker having a really good day. It was Clara, my beloved wife. The woman who told me just 3 days ago that I wasn't suitable company for her mother's birthday party. The same woman who was currently at said party, surrounded by all those important people who mattered so much more than her middle-class, computer-fixing, embarrassingly average husband. I let it ring twice more, just for the satisfaction of it, while I chewed another bite of fried rice and considered my options. I could not answer. I could send it to voicemail and let her stew in whatever chaos was currently unfolding at Windermere Estate. That would be the mature, dignified thing to do. But maturity is overrated, and I was feeling petty in the best possible way, so I swiped to answer. Hello, I said, going for casual, like I was maybe folding laundry or reading a book instead of watching my face appear on 3 different news channels simultaneously. Did you sell your company? Clara's voice came through the phone at a volume that could probably be heard by everyone within a 50-foot radius of her. She wasn't just yelling, she was shrieking, hitting notes that I didn't know her vocal cords were capable of producing. I had to pull the phone away from my ear for a second to protect what remained of my hearing. Hi, honey, I said cheerfully, putting the phone back to my ear once I was sure she'd stopped screaming. How's the party? Having a good time with all those people who matter? Don't you dare be sarcastic with me right now. She was still yelling, but at least she'd dropped from jet engine levels to merely construction site levels. Everyone is freaking out. My mom's friends saw you on the news. On the news, Daniel. The TV is literally on in the living room right now, and your face is on it. Behind the birthday cake. While we're trying to celebrate. I tried very hard not to laugh and failed spectacularly. The image of my headshot hovering behind Patricia's elaborate birthday cake, like some kind of corporate ghost, was too perfect. Tell them I said hi. I replied, popping a piece of Kung Pao chicken into my mouth. And happy birthday to your mom. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but apparently I didn't fit the crowd. Something about not being important enough. Ring any bells? There was a moment of silence on the other end, and I could practically hear the gears turning in Clara's head as she tried to figure out how to handle this situation. She'd clearly called expecting me to explain myself, maybe apologize for making such a big announcement without warning her, possibly beg for forgiveness for embarrassing her in front of her family's important friends. What she hadn't expected was for me to be eating Chinese food and throwing her own words back at her like a boomerang made of pure karma. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice had changed now, shifting from angry to something closer to desperate confusion. We're married, Daniel. You sold your company for hundreds of millions of dollars, and you didn't think to mention it? Not even once. You didn't ask, I said simply, reaching for an egg roll. In fact, you didn't ask about my work at all this week. You were too busy planning the party I wasn't invited to and making sure all the right people with all the right connections were going to be there. Data Stride just wasn't important enough for the guest list. Kind of like me. I could hear commotion in the background now, voices raised in excitement or confusion or probably both. Someone was talking loudly about Tech Venture Global. Someone else was saying something about investments and opportunities. I heard Patricia's voice, shrill and commanding, cutting through the noise like a knife through butter. Clara, get him here. Get him here right now. That made me smile even wider. Patricia, who'd signed off on my exclusion from this party, who'd probably been the one to suggest to Clara that I'd be better off staying home, was now demanding my presence like I was the guest of honor she'd forgotten to invite. The irony was so thick you could cut it with one of her fancy cheese knives. Is that your mom? I asked innocently. She sounds stressed. Is everything okay? Of course everything is not okay. Clara hissed, and I could tell she'd moved away from the main party area because the background noise had gotten quieter. She was probably hiding in a bathroom or a hallway, trying to have this conversation without the entire party listening in. Everyone is asking questions. Dad wants to know why he didn't know about this. Kenneth is going around telling people he's your brother-in-law, like you two are best friends. Mom's investor friends are asking how to get in touch with you. This is insane. Sounds pretty wild, I agreed. Almost like having an important person at the party would have been useful. Too bad, nobody important was invited. Daniel. She was switching tactics now, going for the pleading tone that usually worked when she wanted something. Please, just come over and help us explain this. Everyone wants to meet you. Everyone wants to talk to you. Mom is having a meltdown. Dad is asking a million questions. Just come over for an hour. Please. I leaned back on my couch, surrounded by my Chinese food containers and my ancient sweatpants and my complete and utter lack of interest in saving Clara from the social nightmare of her own making. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. 3 days ago, I wasn't good enough to attend this party because I didn't fit the crowd and might embarrass you in front of the important people. But now that those same important people found out I'm worth a few $100 million, suddenly I'm invited? Suddenly I fit the crowd? Suddenly you want me there? It's not like that. It's exactly like that, Clara. It's literally exactly like that. You uninvited me from a family event because you were embarrassed by me. And now you're uninviting that uninvitation because I'm suddenly valuable enough to be worth your time. Her father's voice boomed in the background, loud enough that I could hear it clearly through the phone. Is that him? Let me talk to him. Daniel. Son, we need to discuss this. Richard had never called me son in his entire life. He usually called me that guy, or Clara's husband, or occasionally just hey you, when he needed me to pass the salt at dinner. But now I was son. Now I was worth a personal conversation. Now I mattered. Is that Richard? I asked. Tell him I'm busy. Tell him I'm working on computer stuff. You know, my little tech hobby. You're being impossible. Clara snapped, and I could hear the tears starting in her voice. Not sad tears, but frustrated tears, the kind she got when things weren't going the way she'd planned, and she couldn't fix it with her PR smile and careful words. This is important. These people are important. We need you here. You mean you need me there? I corrected. You need me to show up and be the successful entrepreneur so you don't look bad in front of your mom's friends. You need me to validate Kenneth's sudden claim that we're tight. You need me to make your family look good by association. But here's the thing, Clara, you should have needed me 3 days ago. You should have wanted me there when I was just the boring computer guy. You should have thought I was worth including before I had a dollar amount attached to my name. There was actual crying now, soft sobs that she was trying to muffle. Part of me felt bad. A very small part. The rest of me was eating another egg roll and feeling pretty good about my life choices. Please, she whispered. Please just come. We can talk about everything else later. Just please come to the party. For me. I sighed. Not a sympathetic sigh, but the kind of sigh you make when someone is asking you to do something ridiculous and expecting you to go along with it. You know what? I can't come to the party, Clara. I'm actually busy tonight. Busy? Busy with what? I'm going on TV, I said casually. Channel 7 called. They want to do a spotlight segment on local business success stories. They're sending a car at 8. Pretty exciting, right? Your boring husband is going to be on television. The silence on the other end was so complete, I thought for a second the call had dropped. But then Clara spoke, her voice small and hollow. You're going on TV. You're actually going on TV instead of coming here. Yep. Wouldn't want to ruin my middle-class aura by showing up where I'm not wanted. Plus, the TV people seem really interested in talking to me, which is nice. Nobody at your party wanted to talk to me 3 days ago, so this is a refreshing change. I could hear her mother in the background again, closer this time. What did he say? Is he coming? Clara, what is he saying? Clara's voice was muffled, like she'd covered the phone with her hand, but I could still make out her words. He's not coming. He's going to be on television instead. The eruption of voices that followed was beautiful. Patricia's shocked gasp. Richard's confused, what? Kenneth's voice saying something about brand opportunity. The general murmur of confusion and dismay from what sounded like the entire party. Listen, I said, pulling her attention back to our conversation. Tell everyone I'm sorry I couldn't make it. Tell them I was busy building something valuable while they were busy deciding I wasn't valuable enough. Tell them they can watch me on Channel 7 at 10 if they want to see what the guy who didn't fit their crowd actually looks like when people who matter are paying attention. Daniel. And Clara? That wine I bought for your mom. The $300 bottle I got specifically because it was her favorite? It's still on the kitchen counter. You can give it to her as a gift from both of us. Consider it my contribution to a party I was never supposed to attend in the first place. Then I hung up, just pressed the end button and watched as Clara Mobile disappeared from my screen. My phone immediately started buzzing again. Her calling back, probably ready to alternate between apologizing and yelling, but I ignored it. I had Chinese food to finish and a television appearance to prepare for, and absolutely zero interest in being someone's convenient solution to a social disaster they'd created themselves. The TV was still showing news coverage of the acquisition. My phone was still blowing up with notifications. And somewhere across town, Patricia's 60th birthday party was probably descending into absolute chaos. It was shaping up to be a pretty good Friday night after all. Within an hour of hanging up on Clara, which felt better than any therapy session I'd ever had. Not that I'd tell my therapist that, my entire digital existence exploded like someone had set off a social media nuclear bomb. My LinkedIn profile, which had been happily sitting at around 300 connections of actual professional contacts I'd worked with over the years, suddenly transformed into the most popular place on the internet that wasn't a cat video or a celebrity scandal. I refreshed my LinkedIn notifications and watched the number climb in real time. 52 new connection requests. Refresh. 87. Refresh again. 123. It was like watching a stock ticker during a market crash, except instead of losing money, I was gaining an alarming number of people who suddenly wanted to be professionally associated with me. People I'd never heard of were sending requests with personalized notes like, looking forward to connecting with a fellow innovator, and would love to discuss potential synergies. These were the same people who probably wouldn't have looked at my profile twice last week when I was just another software guy with a boring headshot and a job description that said data processing. My email inbox was even worse. I had over 200 unread messages, and they were still pouring in faster than I could scroll through them. There were journalists from publications I actually read asking for interviews. There were podcasters wanting me on their shows to discuss the entrepreneurial journey. There were speaking invitations from conferences I tried to get into as an attendee 3 years ago. There were even a couple of literary agents, actual literary agents, asking if I'd ever considered writing a book about building a successful startup, because apparently everyone with a success story now needed to write a book about it. But the absolute best part, the cherry on top of this absurd Sunday of sudden popularity, was watching people from my past materialize out of the digital void like ghosts who'd suddenly remembered they were supposed to be haunting me. Brad from my freshman year dorm, who I was pretty sure had stolen my microwave and definitely never paid me back the $40 he borrowed for pizza, sent me a LinkedIn message. "Hey man, long time. Saw the news about your company. So proud of you, bro. We should catch up sometime. I've got a startup idea I'd love to run by you." Of course he did. Of course Brad, who once told me that my major in computer science was basically a degree in being boring, now had a startup idea he wanted to discuss. I wondered if it involved stolen microwaves and unpaid debts, because that seemed to be his area of expertise. Then there was Jessica Martinez from high school, who I'd had a massive crush on junior year, and who'd friend-zoned me so hard I was pretty sure I'd left a crater. She sent me a Facebook friend request, Facebook, like we were living in 2010, with a message that said, "OMG Daniel, just saw you on the news. I always knew you'd do something amazing. We should grab coffee and catch up. I'm actually single now, just FYI. Winking face." I stared at that winky face emoji for a solid 30 seconds, trying to decide if I was more amused or horrified. Jessica, who'd once told me I was really sweet but not her type, was now sliding into my DMs with relationship status updates and coffee suggestions. The same Jessica who'd gone to prom with Derek Matthews, the quarterback who called me computer nerd like it was my legal first name. That Jessica suddenly thought I'd done something amazing and wanted to catch up over coffee. Just FYI, I muttered to my phone screen. I was the same person last week when I was worth less money. Funny how that works. My Twitter, or X, or whatever we were calling it this week, had gone absolutely bananas. I barely used the platform, usually just lurking and occasionally retweeting something about software development or making a joke about debugging code. My follower count had been sitting at a comfortable 352 people, mostly other developers and tech enthusiasts who appreciated my occasional thoughts on database architecture. Now, I had over 15,000 followers and climbing. People were quote tweeting the news articles about the acquisition with comments like, "This guy is the future of tech," and "Local hero makes it big," and my personal favorite, "Who is this guy and why am I just hearing about him?" Some local influencer with 200,000 followers had posted about me with the caption, "This man just sold his company for $320 million and you've never heard of him. That's how you move in silence. Respect." 100 points. The post had 12,000 likes and 3,000 retweets. I was being held up as an example of humble success by someone who posted daily selfies and product sponsorships for detox teas. The irony was not lost on me. Instagram was its own special disaster. I had maybe 100 followers there, mostly friends and family, and that one cousin who posted way too many pictures of her breakfast. Now my follower count was approaching 5,000, and my last post, a photo of Alex and me at the office from 6 months ago with the caption, "Just another Monday," had 700 comments. People were analyzing this completely ordinary photo like it was the Mona Lisa. "Look at that determination in his eyes," one comment read. My eyes in that photo were mostly showing, "I need more coffee and a nap," but sure, determination worked too. Even my mother had texted me, which was saying something because my mother still called the internet the Google and thought Instagram was a type of Telegram. "Your aunt forwarded me an article about you," her message read. "Why didn't you tell us you were selling your company? Dad wants to know if you need help with your taxes. Call me." My mother wanted to know why I hadn't told her I was selling the company. My mother, who I tried to explain Data Stride to at least 15 times over the years, who always smiled and nodded, and then asked if I was still doing the computer thing. Now she wanted to know why I hadn't kept her informed about major business decisions. The same woman who thought the cloud was exclusively for weather. Kenneth's text was still sitting in my messages, unresponded to and growing more pathetic by the minute. He'd followed it up with another message. "Seriously, man, let's connect. I've got some clients at my firm who would be interested in what you're doing. Could be mutually beneficial. Give me a call when you get a chance." Kenneth wanted to connect me with his clients. Kenneth, who worked at his father-in-law's real estate company in what I was 90% sure was a fake job created to keep him employed, wanted to help me with business opportunities. Kenneth, who'd spent the last 5 years treating me like I was furniture at family gatherings, present but not worth acknowledging, now wanted to facilitate introductions and create mutually beneficial situations. I took a screenshot of his messages and sent them to Alex with the caption, "Kenny boy wants to network." Alex responded immediately, "Ha ha ha. Is this the same Kenneth who asked if you were Clara's charity case last Christmas?" "The very same," I typed back. "Beautiful. Just beautiful. Please tell me you're not going to respond." "Oh, I'm definitely not responding. I'm going to let him marinate in that message. Maybe respond in like 6 months with sorry, just saw this." Alex sent back a series of crying laughing emojis. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize with a 212 area code. New York. I answered, mostly because I was curious and also because at this point, what was one more random call in the chaos? "Is this Daniel Morrison?" a smooth, professional voice asked. "That depends on who's asking and whether you're trying to sell me something," I replied. The voice laughed. "Mr. Morrison, my name is David Chun. I'm a producer for Business Today with Marcus Reed. We'd love to have you on the show next week to discuss your acquisition and your journey building DataStride. Are you familiar with our program?" Was I familiar with Business Today? It was only one of the biggest business shows on cable, the kind of show where CEOs and entrepreneurs got grilled by Marcus Reed, who had a reputation for asking the questions that made publicists nervous and executives sweat. I'd watched it dozens of times, usually while eating dinner and thinking, man, those people have really made it. "Yeah, I know the show," I said, trying to sound casual instead of internally screaming. "Excellent. We typically record on Tuesdays at our Manhattan studio, but we could arrange a remote setup if traveling isn't convenient for you. Marcus is very interested in your story. You've managed to build a highly successful company while maintaining an unusually low profile, which is rare in today's tech landscape." I looked around my living room at the Chinese food containers, my sweatpants, my entire current situation that screamed low profile, mostly because I'd been too busy actually building something to worry about building a brand. "Remote would probably work better," I said. "I'm not exactly prepared for a New York trip this week." "Perfect. I'll have my assistant reach out with scheduling details. This is going to be a great segment, Mr. Morrison. Congratulations on your success." After I hung up, I just sat there for a minute, staring at my phone like it had transformed into an alien device. Business Today wanted me on their show. Marcus Reed wanted to interview me. People who'd ignored me for years were suddenly desperate to connect. My LinkedIn was exploding. My social media was blowing up. And somewhere across town, my wife and her family were probably still trying to figure out how the boring computer guy had become the most interesting person they'd accidentally excluded from their party. I opened my laptop and checked Twitter one more time. Someone had created a meme using my LinkedIn headshot with the caption, "POV, you're about to find out your nobody brother-in-law is worth $320 million. It had 40,000 likes. I retweeted it with the comment, "POV, you're eating Chinese food in sweatpants while watching yourself become a meme." The retweet got 15,000 likes in 10 minutes. "This is insane," I said to my empty apartment. "This is absolutely insane." My phone buzzed again. Another LinkedIn request. Another email. Another person who suddenly remembered we were old friends. I closed my laptop, picked up my remaining egg roll, and smiled. In 3 hours, I'd be on Channel 7's Late Show. Next week, I'd be on Business Today. And tomorrow, I'd probably still be dealing with the fallout from the best timed, "I told you I wasn't invited" moment in the history of family drama. But right now I was just a guy in sweatpants, eating Chinese food, watching the internet lose its collective mind over someone they'd never heard of 24 hours ago. And honestly, it was pretty damn entertaining. That night, while I was busy showering off the remnants of Chinese food and trying to find something to wear that made me look like a successful entrepreneur instead of a guy who'd been living in sweatpants for the past 4 hours, Patricia's carefully curated birthday party was apparently transforming from an elegant celebration into a full-blown social crisis that would be talked about in their circles for years to come. I learned about all of this later through a combination of social media stalking, texts from Alex, who was monitoring the situation like it was the Super Bowl, and eventually from Clara herself, though those details came much later and with significantly more crying. The party had started out exactly as planned. According to the 17 Instagram stories I watched later with the kind of satisfaction usually reserved for watching your favorite sports team crush their rivals. Patricia's living room looked like something out of Architectural Digest. All tasteful flower arrangements, and ambient lighting that probably cost more to set up than most people's monthly rent. The champagne was flowing. The hors d'oeuvres were being served on those ridiculous tiny plates that rich people love for some reason, and everyone was dressed in cocktail attire that screamed, "I have money, and I want you to know it," without me having to say it directly. Kenneth was there with his Instagram influencer girlfriend, a 26-year-old named Brittany, who kept stopping mid-conversation to take selfies and check her engagement metrics. She'd posted about 3 stories already, all hashtagged with things like hashtag blessed and hashtag luxury lifestyle and hashtag birthday celebration, because apparently existing at a party now required constant documentation and strategic hashtag usage. In one of her stories, you could see Kenneth in the background, puffing out his chest and talking to some older guy in an expensive suit, probably trying to look important and successful by association. Clara's Aunt Susan was indeed holding court near the fireplace, regaling a small crowd with her Amalfi Coast stories that everyone had heard a minimum of 4 times. She was wearing what appeared to be approximately $75,000 worth of jewelry and a dress that probably cost more than a used car. Her husband, Uncle Martin, was nursing a scotch and nodding along with the glazed expression of a man who'd heard these stories so many times he could recite them in his sleep. Patricia herself was the center of attention, as intended, wearing a cream-colored designer dress that Clara had mentioned cost only $3,000 on sale, which was apparently a bargain in their world. She was laughing with her country club friends, accepting compliments about the party, the decorations, her dress, her hair, all the standard birthday worship that comes with turning 60 when you're wealthy and well-connected. Richard was schmoozing with his business partners, discussing market trends and investment opportunities in that particular tone that men of a certain tax bracket use when they're trying to sound smart about money. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as Patricia had planned. And then, at approximately 6:05 p.m., someone's phone buzzed with a news alert. According to Alex, who'd gotten the play-by-play from someone who'd gotten it from someone else, it was Patricia's friend Diane who first saw the notification. Diane, the same woman who'd once asked me if I'd ever considered getting a real job, while looking at me like I was a servant who'd wandered into the wrong room. She'd glanced at her phone, frowned, and then her eyes had gone comically wide. She'd apparently grabbed her husband's arm and whispered something urgently, and he'd pulled out his own phone to confirm. Within 3 minutes, half the party was checking their phones. Within 5 minutes, someone had turned on the giant TV in Patricia's living room, the 75-inch monstrosity that Richard had bought last year and Patricia had complained about because it was too large and too obvious, and switched it to the local business news channel. And there I was, my face, bigger than life, hovering on that screen behind Patricia's elaborate 3-tiered birthday cake with its fondant flowers and gold leaf decorations. The headline scrolling beneath my headshot. Local entrepreneur sells company for $320 million. My name in official news font. Stock footage of the Data Stride office. A brief interview clip with Margaret Reeves talking about innovative solutions and impressive growth trajectory. The party, from what I gathered, came to a screeching halt. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze mid-toast. Someone dropped a tiny quiche on Patricia's cream-colored carpet, leaving what I imagined was a very expensive stain that would require professional cleaning and several rounds of guilt-tripping whoever was responsible. Patricia had apparently just been cutting into her birthday cake when the news came on. There's a photo that Brittany posted to Instagram and then quickly deleted, but not before Alex screenshot it and sent it to me. In the photo, Patricia is holding a cake knife, mouth open in what can only be described as shock, while my face beams down from the TV screen behind her like some kind of corporate guardian angel. Clara is visible in the corner of the frame, staring at her phone with an expression that looks like she's just watched her entire worldview collapse in real time. Kenneth is mid-sip of champagne, frozen like a confused statue. The caption Brittany had written before deleting it. When the birthday surprise is a surprise, face screaming in fear birthday cake, hashtag plot twist, hashtag unexpected, hashtag family drama. That hashtag family drama was probably what made her delete it. Or maybe Clara had demanded she take it down. Either way, the screenshot existed forever now, immortalized in Alex's photo library and my own personal collection of moments I wish I could have witnessed in person. The guests, These important people who mattered so much had immediately started asking questions. Diane had apparently been the first to vocalize what everyone was thinking. Isn't that Clara's husband? The one who works with computers? Patricia, to her credit, had tried to maintain composure. Yes, that's Daniel, she'd said. According to multiple reports, her voice tight and controlled in that way that meant she was absolutely losing it internally, but refused to show it externally. He runs a tech company. Data something. Data Stride Analytics, someone had supplied helpfully, probably reading off their phone. Says here he co-founded it 8 years ago. Provides data processing solutions to mid-sized businesses. Over 300 clients across North America and Europe. $320 million. Another voice had added, because apparently the number needed to be said out loud to be believed. Tech Venture Global bought the whole company. Richard had jumped in then, trying to save face, doing damage control like his life depended on it. Yes, we've been following Daniel's progress very closely. Very proud of him. Very proud. He's been working on this deal for months. Brilliant young man. Absolutely brilliant. This was the same Richard who'd introduced me to his golf buddies last summer as Clara's husband. Does something with websites, I think. But sure, they'd been following my progress very closely. They'd been so invested in my success that they'd literally uninvited me from this party 3 days ago. Kenneth, never one to miss an opportunity for self-promotion, had apparently started working the room immediately. Yeah, my brother-in-law Daniel. Absolute genius. He'd been overheard saying to anyone who would listen. We're actually really close. Talk business all the time. I've been advising him on some strategic moves. Really proud to have him in the family. This was Kenneth's version of reality. In actual reality, Kenneth once asked me to fix his laptop because his internet was broken, which turned out to mean he'd accidentally turned off his Wi-Fi and didn't know how to turn it back on. That was the extent of our business relationship, me explaining how to click a button while he nodded like I was teaching him advanced physics. The investors at the party, the ones who'd been invited because they were important and connected and wealthy, had immediately started asking how to get in touch with me. Did I have a card? Was I taking meetings? What were my plans post-acquisition? Was I looking at new ventures? Would I be interested in angel investing? These were people who wouldn't have given me the time of day if I'd been standing right there in the room. But suddenly my contact information was the most valuable commodity at the party. Patricia's friend Marjorie, who I remembered from countless dinner parties as the woman who talked exclusively about her son's career as a corporate lawyer and her daughter's marriage to a doctor, had apparently cornered Clara and said, "You must be so proud of Daniel. What an accomplishment. Patricia, you must be thrilled to have such a successful son-in-law." The look on Patricia's face in that moment, according to witnesses, was priceless. She was thrilled, sure, but also furious, confused, embarrassed, and trying desperately to figure out how to spin this situation into something that didn't make her look like she'd massively underestimated her own son-in-law. "Of course we're thrilled," she'd managed to say. "We always knew Daniel had potential. We're just surprised by the timing of the announcement." The timing. The beautiful, perfect, absolutely magnificent timing of the announcement happening right in the middle of the party I'd been told not to attend. The party where I didn't fit the crowd. The party full of important people who were now very, very interested in the unimportant person who wasn't there. Clara had excused herself to call me, which is when I'd had my delightful conversation with her while eating Chinese food. While she was on the phone, pleading with me to come save her from this social disaster, the party had continued to devolve into chaos. People were Googling me, reading articles about Data Stride, pulling up my LinkedIn profile, trying to figure out how they'd missed the fact that Patricia's son-in-law was apparently a tech success story. Even the catering staff had gotten in on the action. One of the servers, a college kid named Marcus who was working the party to pay for textbooks, had apparently recognized me from the news and pulled out his phone to follow me on LinkedIn during his break. He posted about it on TikTok later. POV. You're serving champagne at a rich people party and you realize the son-in-law they didn't invite is richer than everyone in the room combined. The video got 200,000 views and 17,000 comments about karma and justice and how rich people were the worst. The party limped along for another hour or so, but the damage was done. The elegant celebration of Patricia's 60th birthday had become the party where everyone found out that the family had massively screwed up by excluding the one person who actually had something impressive to talk about. Every conversation kept circling back to me, to Data Stride, to the acquisition, to where I was and why I wasn't there and how nobody had known about this. The photos that made it to social media were incredible. Someone posted a picture of the TV screen showing my face with the caption, "Best Party Guest." Another showed Patricia standing in front of the TV, my headshot visible over her shoulder, with the caption, "Photo Bomb of the Year." Brittany had posted and deleted at least 6 stories, each one trying to make the situation look less awkward and failing spectacularly. By the time I was in the car heading to Channel 7 for my interview, the internet had already decided that Patricia's birthday party was the funniest thing to happen in local social circles in years. There were memes. There were TikToks. There were Reddit threads analyzing the social dynamics of rich people accidentally excluding the one person worth excluding them for. And I hadn't even made it to the TV studio yet. By Sunday morning, my phone looked less like a communication device and more like a hostage situation. I had 63 missed calls, most of them from numbers I recognized, but had zero interest in talking to. Clara had left a dozen voicemails that I'd listened to exactly once before deciding that was enough emotional whiplash for one weekend. The messages were a roller coaster of emotions that would have impressed a therapist and concerned a hostage negotiator. The first few were angry, really angry. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this was?" Everyone kept asking me questions I couldn't answer. Questions about my own husband's company. I looked like an idiot, Daniel. A complete idiot in front of everyone who matters. I'd almost laughed at that part. Everyone who matters. Not everyone I care about, or my family and friends. No, everyone who matters. Like people were ranked by their net worth and social connections instead of, being actual human beings worthy of basic respect. The middle voicemails shifted to desperate. "Please call me back. We need to talk about this. Mom won't stop calling. Dad keeps asking why you didn't tell him about the company. Kenneth is being insufferable, acting like you two are best friends. Please, just call me back so we can figure this out." Figure it out. Like this was a problem to be solved rather than a consequence of her own actions. Like we could just have a conversation and somehow rewrite the part where she told me I wasn't good enough for her mother's birthday party. The last few voicemails were the worst, though. Those were the ones where she cried. Real crying. Not the performative kind she used when she wanted sympathy or was trying to manipulate a situation. "I messed up," she'd sobbed into my voicemail at 2 in the morning. "I know I messed up. I was wrong. I cared too much about what other people thought and not enough about you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please just talk to me." Part of me felt bad listening to that. The part that had married her 5 years ago. The part that remembered when things were simpler and we actually talked to each other instead of just existing in parallel universes. But the other part, the bigger part, remembered standing in our kitchen 3 days ago holding expensive wine and being told I didn't fit the crowd. That part wasn't ready to feel bad yet. Patricia had texted me too, which was somehow even more surreal than Clara's voicemails. My mother-in-law, who communicated with me exclusively through Clara or not at all, had actually typed out a message to me directly. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive politeness wrapped in a bow of fake sincerity. "Daniel, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to reach out personally to express how thrilled Richard and I are about your tremendous success with Data Stride Analytics. We've always believed in your potential and are so proud to have you as part of our family. The party on Friday was lovely, though we were disappointed you couldn't join us. I understand you had prior commitments, which is completely understandable given your busy schedule. We would love to have you over for a family dinner next week so we can celebrate your achievement properly. Perhaps Thursday evening? We're thinking of inviting a few close friends who would love to meet you and hear about your work. Let me know what works for your schedule. With love, Patricia." I'd read that message 3 times, each time finding new layers of audacity. "We've always believed in your potential." That was my favorite lie. Patricia had always believed I was acceptable furniture in her daughter's life, something to be tolerated but not celebrated. And that last part about inviting a few close friends who would love to meet you was just Patricia speak for, "I want to show you off to my social circle now that you're worth something." I'd replied with a single sentence. "Thanks for the kind words, Patricia. Unfortunately, my schedule is pretty packed for the foreseeable future. I'll let you know if that changes." Polite. Professional. absolutely dripping with the subtext of "nice try, but I'm not your show pony." Richard had texted separately, trying a different approach. "Son, we should talk about your next steps. I have experience with major financial transitions and would be happy to offer guidance. Also have some investment opportunities that might interest you. Call me when you get a chance." Son, investment opportunities. Guidance. This was the same man who'd once told me that computer jobs were unstable and I should consider getting into real estate like Kenneth. Now he wanted to offer me financial guidance and investment opportunities. The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. Kenneth's messages were their own special category of desperate networking. He'd sent 14 texts over the weekend, each one more transparent than the last. "Bro, we need to connect. Seriously, got some major opportunities to discuss. My firm's clients are asking about you. Let's grab lunch this week." On me, obviously, huh? That last one made me laugh out loud. Kenneth offering to pay for lunch like that was some grand gesture. Like his middle management salary could somehow impress someone who'd just sold a company for 9 figures. I'd responded to exactly none of them, which I knew was driving him crazy. Kenneth was the type who needed validation, needed responses, needed to feel important and connected. Radio silence was probably killing him. But the message that really got me, the one I kept coming back to and reading over and over, was from Alex. He'd sent it Saturday night after watching my Channel 7 interview, which had apparently gone viral in local business circles. "You handled that perfectly, man. Classy, funny, didn't trash anyone, but made your point crystal clear. Your in-laws are going to be dealing with the fallout from this for months. It's beautiful. Also, we should probably talk about what's next for us. This is just the beginning, brother. We've got options now. Real options. But first, enjoy watching them squirm. You've earned it." Alex got it. He understood that this wasn't about revenge or being petty or rubbing my success in anyone's face. It was about finally being seen, finally being valued, but only after proving I was worth valuing. And yeah, maybe there was some satisfaction in watching the people who'd dismissed me scramble to get my attention now. Maybe. That made me petty. But honestly, I was okay with that. I looked at my phone, at all those unanswered calls and unread texts and desperate messages from people who wanted something from me now that I had something worth wanting. And I smiled. Not a mean smile, not exactly. Just the smile of someone who'd finally figured out that being underestimated wasn't actually the worst position to be in. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well and letting people sit with their own garbage. A week later, Clara came home early from work, which was unusual because she typically stayed late to avoid traffic and also to avoid me, if we're being honest. She looked exhausted in a way that went beyond just physical tiredness. Her makeup was smudged, her hair wasn't in its usual perfect state, and she was wearing flats instead of heels, which for Clara was basically the equivalent of waving a white flag. She found me on the couch, laptop open, responding to yet another interview request. I looked up, said nothing, and waited. The ball was firmly in her court. "I messed up," she said quietly, standing in the doorway like she was afraid to come closer. I cared too much about appearances, about what my family thought, about impressing people who don't actually matter. I leaned back, closing my laptop. "Really? I thought you cared about networking and maintaining the right connections." She winced. "You're impossible." "Actually," I said with a slight grin, "I'm unavailable to shallow people." A small smile cracked through her exhausted expression. "So do you still want to be with me?" The question hung in the air, vulnerable and real in a way Clara hadn't been in years. "Depends," I replied. "Will your mother let me attend Christmas dinner, or do I have to buy the broadcast rights first?" She laughed, actually laughed, and it was awkward but genuine. She sat down next to me, keeping some distance, but at least being in the same room. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did." "That's a start," I said. We sat there in silence, not quite comfortable, but not hostile either. Sometimes humor is the only glue left when everything else has broken. Months later, life looked dramatically different, like someone had taken my old existence and run it through an upgrade program I didn't know existed. I'd moved into a new place downtown, one of those modern condos with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that made you feel like you were living in a movie about successful people. It was quiet, sleek, peaceful, everything my old life with Clara's constant family drama wasn't. The place even had a home office where I could work without hearing Patricia's voice echoing through my nightmares about not fitting the right crowds. Clara and I were on talking terms, which was progress considering where we'd started. We met for coffee every couple of weeks. Awkward but genuine conversations where we tried to figure out if there was anything left worth saving. She'd started therapy, which I respected. I'd started saying no to things I didn't want to do, which she was learning to respect. We weren't back together, weren't even close to figuring out what together would look like now, but we were communicating like actual adults instead of strangers who happened to share a last name. I launched a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, something I'd been thinking about for years but never had the time or resources to actually do. Every other week, I met with scrappy startup founders working out of their apartments and coffee shops, people who reminded me of Alex and me 8 years ago when we were surviving on ramen and refusing to quit. I gave them advice, made introductions, and occasionally invested in their companies when I believed in what they were building. It felt good, using the success for something beyond just having a bigger bank account. The speaking engagements became routine. Tech conferences, university business programs, entrepreneurship summits. Everyone wanted to hear the story of the guy who built a $300 million company while flying completely under the radar. My go-to opening line became, "Remember, if your spouse tells you not to show up somewhere, show up on the news instead." It always got laughs, sometimes uncomfortable ones from people who definitely uninvited someone from something important. Patricia watched every interview now, sending me text messages with smiley emojis like we'd been best friends all along. She invited me to every family gathering, always mentioning which important people would be there, always making sure I knew I was welcome. I went to some, skipped others, and never felt obligated either way. Richard had stopped offering investment advice after I politely declined 3 times. Kenneth still tried to network occasionally, but with less desperation and more genuine curiosity about what I was actually doing. And whenever someone brought up that birthday party, that legendary 60th birthday celebration that had become local social folklore, I just grinned and delivered my favorite line. Ah yes, the night I became too rich to embarrass anyone. The irony never got old. Neither did the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's just living well and letting karma handle the rest. I was finally living on my own terms, and that was worth more than any acquisition deal.